As you really get into your spiritual growth and your spiritual development, it becomes a destructive process. The things that worked for you, the people that worked for you don't anymore. The people around you start going, what is wrong with you? You used to be so cool. You used to be so much fun. I used to understand you. Now you're just weird. And so the people and the jobs and the situations will fall apart. And sometimes it will create a dark night of the soul where everything just crashes and you hit rock bottom. And I have seen higher self with a number of people hit that reset button. But that's a part of how you become your true self, because when you get through all of that, when you start healing that, when you start radiating with your own authentic energy, you bring the right job to you, you bring the right people to you, you bring the right situation to you that augment your energy, that just resonates with you, and suddenly life makes sense. Life is like you have a purpose and you're living that purpose.
Welcome to Living 4D with Chek. Today's guest is paranormal expert, internationally renowned author, speaker and teacher, Kaedrich Olsen. A big thank you to our premier sponsors, Bioptimizers, Paleo Valley, Wild Pastures and Organifi. We could not produce this podcast without their support, and of course, Paul only works with companies whose products he loves and uses. All the sponsors offer special discounts for our listeners, so please visit the show notes page at chekinstitute.com/podcast for links and details. Or just keep listening to this episode for the featured products and offers. Today's episode with Paul and Kaedrich is about the shadow unveiled.
If you haven't listened to my 2 prior podcasts with Kaedrich, they're both absolutely excellent. The first one was on Norse mythology, runes, and Kaedrich is quite an expert at that. He's got a beautiful book on that. Our second podcast together was on entity possession, and we did a comprehensive audio program that's also an extension of that podcast. So the total running time is 7.5 hours if you purchase the full program in the show notes. And today, Kaedrich has put together a real comprehensive outline on the shadow, which I've reviewed, and I agree with everything he shares. So Kaedrich, great to have you back, my friend. Lovely to see you.
Thank you. It's great to be here. I'm excited to dive into this topic with you.
Yeah, well, it's a real one. I mean, we've got plenty of shadows bouncing around the world right now. So the shadow is just like a volcano just coming out of the earth, where we can finally look it right square in the eye. And I think, I think in many ways that's probably absolutely essential, because if we don't deal with it, we're probably going to end up in another dimension of reality altogether.
That's exactly right. And that's exactly it. Shadows, if they stay under the surface and hidden, they have their power, they have their control. But when they erupt, when they show up, and when we project them, when we're seeing them out in the world around us, that gives us that opportunity to take that inward look and go, hey, what's going on? Why am I seeing these shadows? Because no matter what, we're all tied into these shadows one way or another. And as soon as we can learn how to deal with them, we can finally move beyond their influences.
Yeah, there's a vast chasm of interpretation regarding what the shadow is and how to approach it. Can you encapsulate the shadow and then explain why you got interested in the shadow, your personal and professional experiences with shadow work, and then why you feel the shadow is so in vogue today?
You're right. There are so many different ways of looking at the shadow, so many different perspectives. I've read a bunch of books like you have on the subject. And fortunately, it's not that they're disagreeing with each other about what the shadow is. It's just offering a different perception of it. So I can offer my perception. It's the things that we push down, that we stuff down inside of us, that we refuse to look at, that we're afraid to look at, or maybe we're ashamed to look at. These come from the things that we've done, things that have been done to us even, or the things that we've been taught how we're supposed to be, how we're supposed to act and behave. And so the way I tend to look at it is shadows are the thoughts, the emotions, the beliefs, and the behaviors that don't serve us. And the fact that they are hidden, that they're stuffed down into our subconscious, stuffed down into deep into the psyche, means we tend to not really see them. We tend to think this is how the world works. And, oh, the problem was with them, not with me. So we're always projecting it. We're always seeing it in the world. And it's really critical that we can evaluate, is it the body's reaction or is it a learned response? For example, if somebody cuts us off in a vehicle, we're going to have an immediate moment of stress. We're going to have a moment of acute stress. That's the body protecting us. But if we're lingering on that 2 hours later, I can't believe that guy cut me off. Well, that means we got some shadow work. And then we go, no, it's not my problem. It's him for cutting me off. Well, it's your problem that you're lingering with it
Mm.
for so long. And that's where we have to go in and find out why. Why are you so upset when somebody cuts you off with driving? Why is it lingering for so long with you? And even sometimes they're hidden talents, they're hidden gifts. I always talk about the man who grew up thinking he had to be a football player. Dad was always like, "You're a football player, you're football, football, football." Where deep inside he wanted to get into dance. And dad's like, "No, that's what girls do, not boys." And so he never really got to fully express his interest and curiosity for dance because he thought he had to be this big, strong, macho guy. And we do the shadow work, we let things go, and they're like, no, you can still be very masculine and you can have a very masculine expression through dance. And there's a lot of ways of doing that. And ultimately, what these shadows are doing is hiding something very important and very wonderful and very amazing about you. It's hiding that little superpower, that little secret about you away. And when you're doing that shadow work, you clear that stuff out. You get that out of the way so you can be authentically you, not who you were told to be, not doing something to accommodate someone else's comfort zone. You're being authentically you, which is so much more fulfilling than living someone else's dreams or try to appease somebody else to make them compliant so that they're not yelling at you or harassing you. So that's my initial take on what shadow work, what shadows are, and what we need to do for shadow work. And the way I got into this was a twofold process. Is I've been helping people on their spiritual path for a long time, for a lot of years. Primarily, it started out teaching runes and Norse mysticism and helping people with that. And there's always been a paranormal element because the paranormal has always been a part of my life. But I've seen over the years people running into the same issues, the same kind of topics over and over and over. And for the most part, the advice that they were given was just, well, throw peace, love, and light at it. Just smile and make it happy and go away because you can't be a spiritual person if you're getting angry. You can't be a spiritual person if you're being sad. And a lot of these people took that to heart, going, well, I've been doing my spiritual work, so I must have been failing because that driver cut me off and I got so angry at them for that moment. They're not lingering on it, but just that moment. So they thought something was wrong with them. And it's just like, no, 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 no. That's part of the work that we have to do is to be accepting that you can get angry and be a spiritual person. In fact, as I tell people all the time that if you have a limbic system and a brain stem, which you do, you're going to get angry. You're going to get frustrated. You're going to get jealous. You're going to get upset. That's a normal part of the human experience. And where the shadow comes in is they're thinking that they're inadequate. They think that they're not doing a good job of being a spiritual person because they had a moment of anger. So now we have to unravel that shadow and find out, no, that anger is actually me protecting myself. That anger is showing me I am value, that I am worthy of having this level of protection and working. So I help people go into that place where they can unravel some of these stories, these concepts that they believed and they built up to themselves so that it actually moves them to a higher level of spiritual working so they can move to a better state. And I did go through my own dark night of the soul. I went through 3 years of believing I was a terrible, horrible, awful person because I made a choice to go on tour with a band and that tour fell apart and it had dire consequences for the family. And even though I vetted everything, even though I checked everything out, everything was on the level, it was all legit. As business happens, sometimes things fall apart. The tour fell apart and fell out underneath me, but I blamed myself for 3 years. And so I really started having to apply that shadow work to me in my life and my concept, which pulled me out of it. And I'm like, God, okay, finally. And so one of the key aspects of my dark night of the soul is I kept working with whisperers, my guides. They're like, great, here's the stuff we want you teaching. Here's the stuff we want you bring out to the world. And I'm like, cool, that's great. Let me just write it down so I can get out of here. I can't stand this anymore. And they're like, no, 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 no. We're giving this to you to use. And I'm like, no, just let me write a book. Let me write a webpage or whatever. Let me get it taught to people and then I can get out of here. They're like, no, 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 no. The messenger has to be the message. You have to apply this material to yourself. You have to show that it works. People need to see that it's there. People need to see that you're coming from this place where everything fell apart to building and creating and showing people how to do this work. And I'm like, fine. And so that's what brought me here. That's why shadow work is an integral part of my paranormal training, a part of my spiritual development training that I do, so that we can clear those blocks. We can clear the crap that's in the way, holding us down into a limited state in the 3D world.
Yeah, I think one of the key things about shadow work, I don't know if we touched on this before, but there's still an ongoing debate in many circles on whether or not we have free will. But I tell my students and patients and clients, you only have free will to the degree that you've healed your programming. And so the shadow aspect of ourselves, in my experience, has a lot to do with our prior programming. Sure, it's unresolved wounds and challenges with people that led to heavy judgment or various other aspects of ourselves. But the point I'm making is that if we don't look inside of ourselves to see what aspects are expressing themselves through our persona or our ego that are not really authentic expressions of our true self, then we don't really have freedom, and I say to my patients when I'm working with them, I say, how many times have you done something and even said to yourself right before or while you were doing it, I really shouldn't do this, or I shouldn't say this. And then later find yourself going, damn it, why did I do that? I just ended up breaking up with my boyfriend, girlfriend, or losing my job. But they had a voice in their head on one side saying not to do it. But there's this, shall we call it, entity in them that has to express itself. The other thing is, the shadow can also express itself. You talked about sort of a diminishing experience of oneself where they feel less than, but I think one of the expressions of the shadow is ego inflation, where it can actually cause people to say things that, maybe they're saying that they have abilities that they don't have, or they're acting like they got more money than they really do, or they're, you know, and so it can actually sort of lead to kind of a puffing up of an individual that actually leaves them quite insecure on the inside, which can lead to this tension because the inner self is saying, hey, why are you saying that? That's not true. And the outer self keeps saying these things. And so the person's always walking around hoping they're never going to get caught, and so I think that's another thing that leads to a lot of anxiety in people.
That is absolutely true. I've seen that overinflated self-aggrandizement coming through, as just as you said, there's some sort of lower self-esteem, a lack of self-confidence inside. So they have to be big, they have to be boisterous, they have to be aggressive. And where I see that a lot is when I'm working with men. Because, men were taught not to be afraid, not to show any fear. And so what do men do when they're afraid of something? They get aggressive and hostile.
Yeah.
And they get, that big inflated sense like, well, I'm going to take care of this, I'm going to do that. Whereas when they're working with the shadow, they understand that vulnerability and they could be open and vulnerable, to the point where I tell men that real strength is not being big and aggressive unless you absolutely need it for protection, but it's being open, being vulnerable, sharing your experience on the inside with somebody that you can connect with. And then you find that actually builds strength. And how I relate that is with a warrior archetype.
Mm-hmm.
The warrior archetype, as a mature warrior, knows their limitations. They know their weaknesses, they know their strengths, and they can evaluate another person, other people, and find their strengths and weaknesses with other people. And that warrior builds alliances with people that have strengths where they're weak, and where they're strong, those others are weak. And as they build that alliance, they actually build their kingdom and move into the king archetype because they are aware of that.
Yeah, it's an important process. And most elite soldiers as warriors are working in teams as well, and the team leader and the hierarchy above them are always careful to analyze weaknesses and strengths and pair people up so that the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. That's another thing too. COVID kind of pushed a lot of people into a real sort of isolated existence. It pushed so many people into almost a virtual existence, like living online. It allows a lot of room for shadow to express itself without consequence, because there's so much flaming going on and saying things that you would never say in person. So it's interesting because the digital world has allowed the shadow to really make itself more seen, because you can actually see the unfiltered, whatever you want to call it, shit bubbling up from inside, as opposed to where in an adult relationship, you'd have to kind of, well, at least it would be wise to manage some of that stuff. But I'm forever appalled at some of the things people say to each other in various forums. So anyhow, that was just my thought on that. But before we forget, I wanted you to give the name of your book on runes, because I really love that book and it's beautifully well written. It's also a deeply spiritual book.
Thank you. Yeah, it's called Runes for Transformation. And the way I look at that is that the runes are not a tool for divination, but they're rather a tool for understanding your inner world and outer world. We know the inner world and the outer world are reflections of each other. And so the runes give us an opportunity to create like affirmation type work or inner sort of introspective kind of work where we shift our inner runic state and see how that gets reflected in the outer runic state around it. That's why we called it Runes for Transformation. So you can do a critical self-evaluation and then also an extrospection of what are the state of the runes around you.
Yeah, and what is the technical meaning of the word rune? I assume it's symbol or something along that line, but what is the actual meaning in translation?
Great question. The word rune actually means mystery, the unknowable. So it's like the
That's
great
cool.
universal mystery. Yep. And in practical application, runes are literally the written language for Proto Norse and Old Norse languages.
Mm.
So when we find rune stones that are carved like for the memory of a father or a loved one for whatever reason, they're carved in runes. And a lot of words that we use in English today come to us from Old Norse, Proto Norse languages, as well as letters, like the letters C, R, F, S, I. Those are all runic letters. And words like year come from the rune Yera, and the word day comes from the rune Daga. So we get a lot of our English from the runic languages, from the Old Norse and Proto Norse languages where they used runes.
That's interesting. You want to take us deeper into shadows or the shadow concept and where they come from?
Absolutely. Where shadows come from is it's actually a natural, normal part of the human mind, the human state. The way I like to relate this is imagine that you are this great higher level being that came into this world with a higher level purpose. Maybe it was to experience something. Maybe it was to bring some teachings to the world. Doesn't matter. It's your higher purpose, the reason why you came into this world. And part of that reason may be because of the birth family that you were born into, but I'm just going to use this for an example. And you, as this authentic being, came into this world awake, aware, you have your clairvoyance, you have your clairaudience, you have your psychic abilities, your third eye is well open, you are seeing imaginary friends, at least you were told they were imaginary friends, you're interacting with energies, but mom and dad aren't. Mom and dad are completely shut that off. And when you start talking about your imaginary friend, at first they poo poo you, say, yeah, that's nice, it's nice. And eventually it's like, no, I don't want to hear any more about that crap, just go away. Or they'll even bring it up to the point where, no, you're talking to something evil, that thing is going to hurt you, stop it. That's just one example. So you shut down your abilities. You shut down your natural abilities. You come into this world and you have this thing that you need to do. Mom and dad are like, well, no, money doesn't grow on trees. You just can't have what you want. You have to work really hard to earn a little bit of money. And now you're programmed that you have to work really hard to get a little bit of money. And the person who you came to be in this world, that authentic person, gets diminished, gets hidden, gets locked away behind those shadows. Now, the thing is you picked up those behaviors, you picked up those beliefs, those emotions, those thoughts, because you needed to adapt. We go back to Maslow's hierarchy of needs. You have to fit in. You have to have security at the social level. I almost said it in a different way. You have to have security at the social level. You've got to fit in. You've got to be part of your community. And so the first 20 years of your life, you were learning how to fit in, to adapt to your world because it's a need for survival. And that's where we pick up most of our shadows. When we get into our 40s, when we get through our 20s, 30s, when we get into our 40s, that's a time where I see a lot of people start to evaluate their upbringing going, this doesn't serve me anymore. My abilities are coming online. I'm seeing spirits again. I'm feeling energies. And is this evil? What do I need to do about this? They're knowing that they have to go make more money, because part of their purpose in this world is to reach more people. And to reach more people, they need to spend that money on advertising and hiring people to help them do their work. But yet they have this concept, money's evil. I have to work really hard. And so we do the shadow work to erase that programming, to erase the behaviors, those beliefs, to find out what's so important about them that needed to be protected, that was so wonderful about them that they needed to hold on to that and preserve it. So now they can feel free to express it once they get that programming out of the way.
Right. I'm sure you're familiar with Robert A. Johnson's book on the shadow. Are you familiar with that one? It's pretty popular.
I might be. It's not ringing a bell right off the bat yet.
Robert A. Johnson was a real famous Jungian analyst, really deep, amazing guy, great storyteller, mythologist, expert at fairy tales, a lot of stuff. He wrote a lot of excellent books. And he's got a book on the shadow. I can't remember the title, but it's got shadow in the title. But he really describes that the enculturation process is where the shadow begins. He talks about how we are pitted against our instincts by our parents and educators and churches and religious organizations, but ultimately that when we cannot really express ourselves authentically, being told stop asking questions, be quiet, quit playing with your genitals, whatever it is, that we have to take these natural expressions of ourself, because the child's so tapped into its sort of authentic animal nature. It's kind of like the analogy of the centaur, where you've got the upper body of a human, the lower body of a horse or an animal. And the lower body is representing our animal nature, our instincts, our drive for sex, our drive for, like you said, our limbic and reptilian drives are very strong. But then there's this rational faculty riding up above it. And part of the spiritual path is to learn to manage those instinctual drives and those animal urges and sort of the instant gratification desire. I'm hungry, or the impatience with things. And so the process of not being able to express yourself, or not being able to dress the way you want to dress, or eat the way you want to eat, or what you want to eat, and many other things, is really how Robert A. Johnson describes that the shadow begins to form. And ultimately, it's about fitting in. And so that's quite a powerful process, because the enculturation process can be radically different from culture to culture, from religion to religion, and almost household to household. I mean, I remember being a kid, and I would go to, I had a bunch of friends that were Catholic, and I would go see, just like, I used to think my father was abusive, and I thought I was the only one. Then I realized, wow, these Catholic kids just get the living hell beat out of them, and they had this very strong spare the rod, spoil the child type attitude. And then I might be with some friends that didn't have any religion at all, and they seemed completely free of all that baggage. But then there's a lot of difference in that enculturation process, from literally from household to household, and even between parent and child. My brother and I have two brothers, but I was the oldest, and then my next brother down was a very different human being than me, and my sister's very different than me. Each of us kids is very, very different, even to this very day. So how the parent interacts with each child is very different. And I'll give you an example. My brother wet the bed, and little did my parents know that the detrusor nerve, the nerve to the bladder that controls regulation, doesn't myelinate in many young kids until 13 years of age. So kids get treated, and this is what happened to my brother. He got treated as though he was being disrespectful, or somehow just trying to piss my parents off or something. So my father beat my brother too many times to count over this. And the stress of that, and just the environment we're in, well, my brother became a drug addict by the time he was in the 7th grade. And he didn't do well in team sports because he just didn't like anyone else telling him what to do. He couldn't get along with people. But I liked competition, so I would take the same stress that he had from our traumatic family environment, but I would exert it through boxing or hockey or football, but he didn't really have that outlet. So he needed a lot of violent interaction with people and a lot of drugs to sort of medicate that. So what I'm pointing out is that even within one family, you can get very different shadow orientations and formations because each soul has to deal with the stress in their own way, and each parent-child relationship's unique depending on the unique characteristics of that soul.
I absolutely agree. And that's one of the fascinating things to me is children can grow up in the same household, had mostly the same experiences. They're always going to be different, but they come out completely different. They'll have a different interpretation, a different perspective of the same events, and that will lead for one to be a strength and for another to be not necessarily a weakness, but it will be an inhibitor for them in one way or another. And that is part of the work that we do with shadow work is we'll go into things exactly like that, like what you talked about with your brother and the over disciplining, and we can do some sort of regression work to unravel some of those emotions that were in the moment. It doesn't stop the memory of it, the logical memory, but we change the emotional charge so that emotional charge is no longer driving the shadow behaviors within us. So it's absolutely fascinating. And you're right, there is no one quick fix to this, to shadow work. I can't give, and nobody can give a one simple answer. Here it is, because we are all very unique individuals. We all have our unique experiences, and more importantly, we have our unique perceptions of those experiences. So every single person is amazing and beautiful and unique in that way that we get to go and experience what those shadows are. So we get to know what those shadows have to say and what it really means about that person as an individual. So shadow work is very much an individual process because of what you said, even if we grow up with the same kind of culture.
Hi, everybody. I sure hope you're enjoying the podcast. As a therapist that is constantly teaching people about nutrition and hydration, I've found that the only people that really understand and use electrolytes, in general, are endurance athletes. But what most people don't know about is the importance of electrolytes for general health, mineral nutrition, improved hydration, blood sugar and insulin regulation, enhanced vitality, and enhanced brain function. Though there is a rising awareness of electrolytes and many companies offering them, I can assure you that they are not all created equally, and what that usually comes down to is the quality and the cleanliness of the source materials and how they are combined. Having tested many electrolyte products, I was honestly shocked when I experienced Paleo Valley's essential electrolytes. Why? Because I eat a super high quality diet and back it up with the world's highest quality whole food supplements to guarantee a full spectrum of nutrition, and I'm a lover of high quality salts, so I thought for sure I was getting enough electrolytes. When I tested other electrolyte products, I honestly felt no difference. When Paleo Valley sent me their essential electrolytes to test, I was honestly shocked at how much more energy I had. I even experienced an improved level of mental clarity that I didn't expect from an electrolyte drink, of all things. Paleo Valley's essential electrolytes are available in orange, watermelon, and lemon lime flavors and is a whole food sourced electrolyte blend. Get the complete benefits of trace minerals and electrolytes found in unprocessed ancient sea salt, organic coconut water, and seaweed extract without the refined sugar and synthetic ingredients in most electrolyte drinks. Though Paleo Valley's essential electrolytes are good for children and adults, I feel this product may be one of the most important dietary additions for anyone age 50 and beyond because the benefits that essential electrolytes offers addresses many of the problems common in aging people today. In fact, I've been adding them to my daily health and performance shake since the day I first tried them and will continue to do so. To get your essential electrolytes and save 15% on your order, go to paleovalley.com/Chek15. That's PALEO valley.com/CHEK15. If we want to make the world a better place, we've all got to stay healthy and fit and support companies like Paleo Valley because they're a perfect example of the kinds of companies we need more of in the world today. Enjoy essential electrolytes.
One of the interesting components of the shadow work and the whole concept, you can't see the light without shadow. If it wasn't for shadows, we wouldn't see light. Angie uses the analogy that if you have a tapestry on the wall and you removed all the dark colors from it and left only the light colors, it would not look very attractive. It would take a lot of the important contrast that gives depth, dimension, and feeling to the art. We don't see the light moving through space until it hits the Earth's atmosphere. So if we think of the Earth's atmosphere as the shadow element, it allows the illumination to be there. And because consciousness is a psychic substance produced not blindly, but in living awareness of opposites, you can't have good without bad or north without south. So what I'm trying to bring up here is the concept of completely removing one's shadow or eliminating all these things. It can take away the imperfection of an individual that leads to the uniqueness of the individual that can be exactly what makes them special. I'll give you an analogy. I've had lots of patients in my career that get on this detox fanaticism. I mean, they're just constantly cleaning and killing parasites after parasites and wipe themselves out because there's nothing left inside of them. I'm like, you got to stop all this shit. You can scrub the paint right off a car if you work at it. There's a balance to all this stuff. You drink enough turpentine and piss and you'll ruin yourself. Piss being, urine therapy. Like you talked about anger earlier. Like I'm a fiery personality. I'm never going to turn. I don't care if I hung out with God for 1,000 years, I would still come back with a personality, and I'd still come back with fire in me. I'm not a kind of guy that's passive about shit. So I don't think all the shadow work in the world is going to turn me into Mr. Fluffy. I'm never going to be Thich Nhat Hanh. And I love Thich Nhat Hanh. Don't get me wrong. I'll never be an Eckhart Tolle type either. I'm kind of going to be the spiritual warrior character, So, like, where's that fine line, in your opinion, between shadow work that's healthy and productive, but where it starts to erode the essential natural character of the individual?
Here's the fun thing. Shadow work actually enables the natural character of the person. So with shadow work, one of the things, like I was mentioning, if somebody is maybe too milquetoast, too much of a wet noodle,
Yeah.
right?
Or too much the other way.
Right. It might be because they had like the super overbearing father, the super overbearing teachers. They were taught at a very young age that they don't have a voice. And if they express their voice, they're going to get punished. So they learn to be quiet and demure. And then we start unraveling those shadows and we find that passionate, fiery person underneath that's just been waiting to come out and show themselves. And I tell people all the time, anger is protecting you. Anger is you're telling you how valuable you are, how you're worthy of something. And so if you have a moment of anger, that means there's something great and wonderful about you that's good. And if you're angry at somebody else, like maybe we're angry with a kid because they did something. Well, you're actually doing that to protect them. Like if they're about ready to run out into the street, it might show up as anger. Get back here. What are you doing? You can't be doing that. But it's because you love your kid. And if a person has too much of that, no, I can't express myself. No, I can't show myself that way. They may not be there to protect their kid at that moment because they don't have that fire. And so what I do emphasize to folks is to look for the contrast. Look for that all the time because there's so much information in contrast. If we live in a world full of confirmation bias, we're not learning. We're not growing. In fact, we become complacent and stagnant in a world full of confirmation bias. But when we find that contrast, when we embrace cognitive dissonance, that's when we can start to grow. That's when we start to develop. And so with shadow work, I see a lot of people get comfortable and happy to fly their freak flag. They turn out to be these amazing, wonderful people doing things that they never thought they would do in their entire life because now they're authentic. And then there's two other elements that show up with this. Sometimes the higher self comes into this world to experience the crud, to experience the crap. It wants to know what that's like. It wants to experience that. And if we spend a lifetime saying, no, I'm not going to do this, I'm not going to acknowledge that, the higher self is like, but Come on. All right, here's another situation where you have to experience that hardship. And we go, nope, nope, I'm not going to do it. All right, here's another experience where you have to address some of this inner pain. Nope, I'm not doing it. Okay, well, here's another one, until we stop and we say, fine, I'm going to sit with this heartache. I'm going to sit with this grief. I'm going to sit with this anger. I'm going to let it have its say. I'm going to give it its moment. I'm going to give it its expression in a safe, healthy way. We embrace that. And then the higher self goes, cool, did that. Hey, let's move on to the next fun thing. And the second part of this, the way I teach shadow work, is that it's skills building. Because what works for you now, the person who you are now, they're all adaptive traits. It's working for you. It's beautiful. Maybe your life is great. Maybe you cleared all the shadows from the first part of your life and you're living a wonderful, beautiful life. But the person you need to upgrade to 10 years from now, you have to look at all the stuff who you are now, and those become shadows. So you have to work through all of that. I mean, think about this. Every time you've upgraded your business, everything probably flew into chaos. Things were a little bit crazy. You had to do some sort of self-evaluation, to do some self-work to upgrade your business to the next level. Same way, if any part of your life that you want to upgrade your life to, be it business, be it relationships, be it anything, you have to address the shadows of who you were 5 years, 10 years ago that was working for you. Those things were beautiful and they worked out great. But now they're going to hold you back from becoming who you need to be at that next level. So you're never done engaging that contrast. You're never done embracing cognitive dissonance. You're always looking for that contrast. And that's what I tell people as they're doing their shadow work. Two very interesting things happen with them. When they get used to it, when they get really proficient with shadow work, they may have a cruddy moment and then they stop and go, oh, hey, shadow, how are you doing? What are you doing here? What are you trying to teach me? And then they can do their shadow work. And then if they are around other people projecting their shadows onto them, you get to go, oh, that's your shadow. How fun is that? What are you going through that you get to learn about this? So you're able to pick up that contrast and you learn to use that contrast as a stepping stone to move to the next level. So shadow work actually gets to be fun after a while.
Yeah, for me personally, I think one of the things that's important, at least from my perspective, is to have enough time in your day that where you commit to emptying yourself and just being able to be a witness to your own mind. Because I think there's no better way to do shadow work than just to watch the show as a detached observer and just be honest and say, that part of me doesn't serve me anymore. Or maybe that served me, when I was a football player in high school or college, but now that aspect of myself is getting in the way. It's disabling my ability to be part of a team, or there might be character traits that are disruptive in your spousal relationships and things like that. If they really want to really become who they came to the world to be, there has to be some commitment to time where you're really giving love and attention to yourself and being honest about who it is that you choose to be in the world now, and then look for the parts of you that are really not supportive of that intention.
Absolutely. The way I kind of look at this as an analogy is it's inertia. Your life is following a trajectory. It's got a vector and it's got momentum to it. And if you don't put some energy into shifting that momentum, you're just going to keep going in that direction. Just with inertia, if you want to change the direction of an object, you want to slow it down, you want to speed it up, you got to put energy into that. And the same way when it comes to you as an individual, you've got to realize that you are worth the time, effort, and energy to make that change in trajectory in your life. And this is what I will tell people all the time. If you don't, where are you going to be in 5 years? What's your family going to be like? What's your living situation going to be like? In 5 years, if you let these shadows continue to control and basically create your reality for you, are you willing to put that time and effort and energy to commit to that work on a daily basis where you're doing your shadow work, you're doing your spiritual growth work so you can change the trajectory of your path and show your kids and your loved ones how to do it too?
Yeah, I tell people quite frequently, be they patients or clients or students, I say, look, because it's real common for a therapist like me to get people that are unconscious of the fact that a lot of the stuff they're complaining about, even having health problems with all the time, is exactly what they have learned to use their creative energy to create, either out of negative programming or fear or any other number of influences. But I tell them, look, it doesn't take any more energy to create what you want in your life than it does to create what you don't want. The difference is you're just conditioned to always focusing on the negative. And if you just take the same amount of energy you're using to manifest all these challenges in your life and orient it toward what I call your dream, your goal or objective, which is what I say brings the levity. Like when you visualize yourself having the body you want, or having the income that you want, or the partner that you want, if you can be present in and with that vision and make that your mission, then when you are doing this healing work or growth work, it's stepping into and using your creative energy to be the person you want to be, where prior to coming to see a therapist like me, they're just unconscious of the fact that they're just spending all their energy and resources on being the person that they don't like and don't want to be. And therefore, their whole life is just mirroring that back to them. It's no more work to create what you want than it is to create what you don't want. But often people are oriented toward the negative for all the reasons we've been discussing. And I say, look, it's just a conscious effort to redirect your energy, because the energy itself is unbiased. It'll produce anything you want. If you want to treat people like shit, they'll treat you like shit too. But if you want to treat people with love, they're probably going to be more loving to you. You'll never know until you shift gears.
Exactly. When it comes to paranormal interactions, I've got 9 rules to help people understand how to work safely with it. But the first rule that I emphasize everywhere applies to so many things across the board. And that rule is similarities attract and perpetuate. With runes, we have one rune called Wunyo. It's about joy. It's about the things that you've achieved and what you're successful at. There's another rune, Nauthies, which is about need, constraint, the things that you don't have. And so in the same situation, it's the end of the month. A person has all of their bills paid and they've got $20 left in the bank. A Nauthies person will go, oh crap, I only got $20 in the bank. What am I going to do? That's it. And the universe, source energy, their own energy is going to go, oh, you like these lessons and challenges of scarcity? Cool. Here you go. Have more of that. There you go. Have at it. Because the universe is responding in kind to what your energy state is. Granted, if you're now in the Wunyo state, you're like, okay, bills are paid, food's in the fridge, everyone's taken care of, and I got $20 left. How cool is that? Look at that. I paid everything and I have some surplus. The universe is going to go, oh, cool. You like these lessons of abundance? You like all of that stuff? Great. Here you go. Here's more of that. But if we're caught up in the shadow, the lessons that we learn, like I see with so many people, you have to work really hard to make a little bit of money. And my dad even told me that overtime is blood money, that if you work overtime, then the government's going to take more money from you. So you don't even get paid more. So don't even work harder at it. You're just going to end up making less money. So people grow up with these concepts and now they're wondering why they're not making more money. It's because they've got all of these beliefs from childhood where it's like, no, 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 no. Let's revamp that. Look what all I've done and look how much more there is to do and how grateful I am for all the stuff that I do have, how grateful I am that things are working. And the universe goes, cool, let's give you more of that. But sometimes it takes shadow work to get rid of some of those beliefs that are getting in the way.
Yeah, speaking of money, my parents were always fighting over money. It was always a point of contention. I think, money was kind of like a linchpin that often either led to harmony or total chaos. Because when we were low on money, as is often the case in most households, mom and dad are getting nervous, edgy, and monitoring who's doing what with money. It gets intense, right? And when I was 50, I went through a midlife crisis. And one of the things that was so stressful to me is I had made millions and millions of dollars, but I could never get any of it to hang around. It was like, where the hell's all this money going? It was at the time I met Angie, who money just seems to magically appear for her. She's like, how in the world she bought her beautiful house cash, and she's just always like, money just seems to be like her best friend. And so I said to her one day, you have got some kind of a relationship with money that I don't have, but I need to figure out how it is you're doing this. And so we talked about it for a while, but what really helped me though was just hearing about her relationship with money and how, money to her is more like a spirit or like a friend. And for me, money was always something that, like you talked about, my childhood association was it always connected to pain and battle and work hard and there's never enough. And sure enough, my life was just echoing that back to me. And it's like, God, I make more money than my whole family combined. And I still am struggling with money. And so what I did is, and this is kind of a strange way to do shadow work, but I just listened to Angie and watched. And I incorporated as much of her story into my story so that whenever the little Paul spoke up and said, "Oh, you're going to have to work real hard, or you're going to run out of money, or this is going to cost too much," I would then swap storylines and say, "How would Angie do this right now?"
Love it.
And then the next thing you know, with probably within about a year, I started noticing that a lot more money was coming, and money would show up out of the blue. Someone who owed me money from 10 years ago decided to pay me or some crazy shit. And fortunately, a lot of these money surprises started happening right when we were selling our house and buying our new house because we needed a lot of money, and it worked. Sometimes shadow work is easy to do because all you got to do is look for the person that has the qualities and the character traits that you know that you would like to embody, and simply listen to and observe them instead of having to go drudge yourself out of the basement and go through a bunch of guilt and shame. Just say, how can I be more like that person, and practice it?
Absolutely. You were aware of the contrasts and then you applied the contrast to yourself. I love that. That's absolutely a good way. And that's a big part of what I do with shadow work is I do spiritual growth and shadow work so that you have that uplifting stuff, the stuff that pulls you up. And even if shadow work sometimes can get heavy, great, let's do some of the more positive stuff. Let's do the uplifting stuff so that you aren't brought into that, so you can start replacing your energy states. Absolutely. I think that's a beautiful example of it. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, and it helps to be around somebody who has an uplifted spirit. I mean, Penny's got a great spirit. Penny can handle anything. Penny's got a different orientation to money than I do. You know, I'm one of these guys. If I don't have $300 in my pocket, I don't feel comfortable because I like to be ready for almost anything, you know. And I figure, well, I don't know how I came up with this imaginary number, but it seems like, you know, whatever it is, if I want to buy some art supplies or, you know, a book or whatever, it seemed to me that 300 seemed to be the magic number for me. But Penny can go travel around the world with $5 in her pocket, and she doesn't even think about it. I'm like, how in the friggin' world does she do that? Because I would just feel like I was running on fumes and just be worried something was going to happen because Murphy's Law might take effect, or get stuck somewhere and have not even enough money to get an Uber or something. But so if someone knows they need to do a fair bit of shadow healing or of a certain nature, like I keep marrying partners that abuse me, or I keep getting into business relationships with people that rip me off, then being around people that are successful in that light and really allowing their spirit to come into you and observing them intelligently and taking careful notes. How do they deal with challenges? What's their psychological orientation around, like, what would they do if money got low? What would their orientation be? What would their inner language be? Ask good questions. Just as you talked about the law of similars, opposites attract. Let's call ourselves, for the sake of the moment, an unsuccessful person. You'll have successful people all around you. That's just how it works. North and south attract each other. You know, high and low meet each other. So you can always look for the people that have these other qualities that we want to add, and they're always there. I don't think anyone has to go very far. I mean, even in the ghetto, there's a lot of people that came out of the ghetto. I mean, B.B. King came from a hellaciously tough childhood, hardly had any money, could barely feed himself. A lot of these great musicians and artists and actors, and I saw some great documentaries on artists that learned to do art in prison and then just kept going and had to steal stuff from the laundry room and make stuff out of wax and had to do all sorts of stuff that would have got them in a lot of trouble in prison. But they were so passionate about expressing themselves that they ended up coming out of prison and starting their own galleries and being, you know, millionaires. And so you see that there's people around us, no matter where you're at, whether you're in jail or whether you're in a ghetto, or there's always people around us that have this spirit that if we watch and we pay attention can be a great gift to us. I don't think, the old saying, God's closer to you than your breath. I think the solutions to our problems is just as close. The shift is just going from being overpowered with inertia to looking for levity and transformation and having a clear vision of who you choose to be.
Yes, absolutely. And to that effect, what I've seen is I definitely agree with that we are an amalgam of the 5 people we keep closest to us. On the back of my hand, I've got runes that basically say Brander af Brandi Bren. It's from Havamal, that basically a brand is a burning branch. So a burning branch will lead to a burning branch to lead to a burning branch. Think of like candles at a candlelight vigil. And so it reminds me to keep the people around me in a higher state and to stay in a higher state so that I can help influence the people around me so that we have this cumulative effect to help each other. And so that's where we're always pulling each other up. I love being around successful people, learning what works for them, what doesn't work for them, so I can help not only modify what I'm doing, but like you were saying, it changes my story. I can apply it and change it to my inner world. And to that effect, I've had people, clients, who have like, but there's nobody around me. There's nobody that gets me. There's nobody that does this. There's nobody that does that. And that's true. Sometimes it's difficult to find that extra person that you need. And so there's a shadow right there. So we'll get rid of that. And what I found is that if people are working through their shadows, they start to resonate with their own authentic energy, and it starts to draw people to them that are in resonance with their energy.
Mm-hmm.
And where they didn't have community before, it's just like suddenly, where did these people come from? They weren't here before. And now they start augmenting each other's lives. And then they start building each other up. And it's amazing work. So we have to work on both ends of the spectrum. So it's kind of fun to see that happen.
Yeah. I think personally, the key word here is intention. When your intention is to grow, to live and love fully, and to really, be in the world and to give something to the world, that intention shifts everything. If you're caught in a victim mentality, a poor me mentality, or you're caught in the saboteur archetype, or you're stuck in the prostitute archetype or the eternal child archetype, until you actually envision yourself as something more. And that's where because source says yes to everything, because God's happy to experience everything, because that's the only way God can experience itself.
Mm-hmm.
So there's no choice, there's no debate over whether I'm going to be a sad sack or the life of the party. It's just the intention. And once we set the intention, we literally put spirit into tension, and that brings that energy into us. And we begin to magnetize, as you were alluding to, those people that are in line with the intention in sympathetic resonance. And so I think step one for shadow work and for healing and for getting clear on who you want to be and who you want to be with, who your tribe is having a clear intention, because that's ultimately what sets the frequency that determines the resonance, which then determines what you attract.
Absolutely. That's why when people come to me for shadow work, it's important. They're feeling that resonance. They're feeling that pull. It's like, could it be higher self? It could be guides. It could be their own subconscious saying, okay, it's time for this. And here's the guy that seems to teach that stuff. So I tell people, look for that. If you're being called to this, if you're feeling that pull, follow through with that intention, because that is something that's an intention coming to you to do this work. It's that intention that we're ready to get this stuff going. And that's a very important thing to follow and to pay attention to.
Yeah. Kaedrich, you speak of the shadow matrix, collectively projected shadows, which seems to be a very important concept today, particularly with the CIA's dictum that our work will be done when nobody knows what the truth is. Now, when I first learned that, I was shocked that we have a government organization who is working against its own people and the rest of the world to get people to where nobody knows what the truth is. I mean, that to me is well, there's no words except a death sentence. I'd love to hear your thoughts on why a U.S. government organization created to protect U.S. citizens would be one of the greatest threats to our nation, our sovereignty, and one of the very reasons Americans are despised by so many nations that have been seriously damaged or destroyed by the exploits of the CIA.
I'm not sure about that one for the CIA. I hear what you're saying, and I'm not sure that it's just limited to the CIA. I think it's prevalent in so many different places. It's all over the place because the nature of the shadows is that we project them onto each other.
Mm-hmm.
That's one of the best ways we know shadows is we project it onto another person. Oh, I can't believe they're pissing me off about this. Oh, I can't believe they're doing this to me. And it's like, well, they're not doing it to you. You're choosing to feel that way. And the reason why I call it the shadow matrix is I don't want it to confuse with like the movie or the science fiction or anything. Not that it's a computer simulation. It's a matrix in the proper term that we're projecting onto each other. And that's what can give the rise to certain organizations creating a culture within themselves that will set these things up. We'll see this with corporations, we'll see this with religious groups, with political affiliations, and we'll see that with all sorts of organizations where somebody starts to perpetuate these shadow traits within themselves and within each other, and they start projecting that onto each other. And the downside to that is when we get enculturated to these shadows that are all around us, we think that this is the only way that the world works. This is the way it always has been. This is the way people are. This is how people are doing. And so if we see some of that shadow enculturation with like the CIA, well, they have this natural skepticism about everybody. They have to watch out for everybody. We have to shut everybody down. We can't be doing this. And so they're going to project that onto each other. They're going to project that out to the world. And I want to throw the other possibility out. I don't know, because sometimes the other side of that is true. Sometimes we see the operations of a certain organization. We don't understand what's going on. I'm not saying this is the case here, but I'm saying sometimes we see the operations of an organization. We don't know what's going on. And then we get into our own fear state, in a sense. And then we start to project that fear out. And then we start using our logical mind to justify that fear. And all of a sudden, we're creating another shadow culture. This is kind of what happened with like the Masons, in essence, what happened with the Illuminati. The Illuminati, from my understanding of studying it for these years, they were just a bunch of science nerds. They were exploring the scientific method to explore the world, but the Catholic Church at the time said, you can't be doing that. That's a no-no. So the shadow culture of that Catholic Church said, okay, we're going to shut down these science nerds and tell the world that these Illuminati people are trying to control and rule everything, and they have these ties to the Masons. Therefore, here's this big bad organization of the Illuminati when it was just science nerds. And it's just shadows getting projected from this organization onto the people believing the fear-based narrative, that the artificial fear that's created from it. And next thing you know, we're living in a society of people going, oh, we've got to shut them down because they're evil. And it's like, well, are they really? Where is the evil? Where is the misinformation, the disinformation going on? What's behind the fear-based narratives out there? Who's perpetuating them and why? And I think when we get to that, we can finally move to a higher state of mind where we can go, oh, okay, this really is a bad thing that needs to be shut down over here, or this is something that we need to create over there. So I think that's how I like to work with the shadow matrix, is looking at those fear-based narratives and the enculturated shadows, and how do we recognize them and move through them.
Enzymes are one of the most important things we can use to supplement our diet. Very few people have normal levels of digestive enzymes. It's extremely common to be digestive enzyme deficient because so many people are eating cooked foods, processed foods, packaged foods, etc. The best digestive enzymes I've ever found are Masszymes by Bioptimizers. And one of the things I like about them is not only are they the most advanced technology for how they're produced, the science behind them, but I take them on an empty stomach every morning and every night as proteolytic enzymes to help clean my body. So I've got Wade here, who's the formulator of these enzymes, to tell us how do they work as digestive and proteolytic enzymes, because today I think we really need to be supplementing with high quality enzymes. So Wade, what's unique about Masszymes?
Well, one of the interesting things is undigested protein is one of the biggest contaminants that cause problem for people, whether it's in their blood or inflammatory conditions or even impairing recovery. And it's quite common amongst athletes who have high protein diets, interesting enough, who are looking to add recovery, but they're not breaking down their protein effectively. And that was my case way back in the day as a former bodybuilding champion. So we set about cultivating and developing an enzyme formulation that handled all of the amino acids in a pH range from 2 to 12, as well as providing an assortment of assistant enzymes. In other words, it doesn't just break down protein, it handles carbohydrates, it handles fats, it handles fibers, a variety of different things. And they work synergistically together to make sure that you can break down just about any food and digest it properly. Now, when you talk about the difference between enzymes, there's digestive enzymes and systemic enzymes. Systemic enzymes such as like nattokinase or serrapeptase. Well, they don't help break down digestion, but they can break down inflammation or inflammatory conditions, undigested proteins, or scarring tissue inside the body. Well, it turns out when you take masszymes on an empty stomach, it works exactly the same way. It will go into the bloodstream and now works as a systemic enzyme, reducing inflammation, accelerating recovery times. Matt just tore his Achilles tendon and made a full recovery after surgery within a few weeks, which they expected for many months. He was taking as many as 100 a day. Now, I'm not suggesting people do that, but this was an extreme condition. And the bottom line is masszymes is great for recovery, for cleaning up undigested proteins in the system, as well for digesting just about any meal. If this isn't the best digestive enzyme or systemic enzyme that you've ever taken, you get your money back. That's the Bioptimizer guarantee.
You can try Bioptimizer's masszymes at bioptimizers.com/living4D and get 10% off using the code Paul10. That's bioptimizers.com/living, the number 4 and the letter D, and the code is Paul10. Plus, Bioptimizers always have great bonuses and offers when you purchase multiple bottles. So make sure you check them out at bioptimizers.com/living4D and use the promo code Paul10 for your 10% discount.
This really is about the question of evil. There's a lot of different opinions. I've studied multiple books just on evil. I've looked at Jung's teachings on evil, Steiner's teachings on evil, and many others. There's many people that say, oh, there isn't evil in the world. It's just, people make it up and whatever. It's kind of whitewashing the reality of it. So my question really is, how do you see the relationship between the shadow and what I would call authentic evil?
That's a very fair question, and I don't have a full comprehensive answer to that because there are different types of evil in the world, so to speak. There's evil entities, demonic beings, that sort of thing. There's the evil that humans do to each other, and there are all sorts of philosophical concepts of evil. And if we really look at kind of evil, I don't have the clear answer to this yet. But the best way I've come to understand it is I do think maybe it's 1% of the population has a brain disorder that leads to psychopathy and sociology. Sociopathy. Sociologists, there we go. No.
Yeah.
Sociopathy and psychopathy. And they inflict trauma in droves upon people. And that trauma in people will cause the people who were not a part of that 1% prone to psychopathy to now have psychopathic, sociopathic tendencies because of the trauma that they endured. And then they push that onto other people. So there's like this cycle of trauma that continues on, hurt people, hurting people, basically. And we'll perceive that as evil. And absolutely, they're horrific things. And, people are doing these horrific things. We got to shut it down. We got to, stop it completely, because these things cannot perpetuate in this world. Genocides, all of this stuff, there's something off with that. And one of the ways that I look at shadows and shadow energy, because to me, emotions and thoughts are energy. They're forms of energy. And everything is source energy. Everything is universal source energy, but it gets distorted.
Yes.
And it can be distorted. And that's where we start to find people who maybe have a beautiful soul, but through their own actions and the actions taken to them, that energy gets distorted. And then that energy gets projected and received, and it just continues this distortion. And with shadow work, we can alleviate some of the distortion. For super levels of trauma, shadow work doesn't work. Shadow work is not good for big, deep trauma. That's where we still need to go for other trauma therapies. But shadow work is great as an adjunct to the trauma work. Now, at the level of the soul, at the level of the afterlife, this is also one of the areas where I evaluate evil. In working with the afterlife and working with spirits and people who are crossing over and my guides talking about the process, 100% of the time, when you get to the other side, there is that life review. And the best way of describing life review is you're moving out of a linear state of existence to a nonlinear. So it looks like all of your life is happening at once. So that's what they consider life review. And as you're doing that, there is a group of people, a council of people who are with you, higher level beings, high level guides, who weirdly enough understand everything that you've been through, every decision you made. And they look at everything that you did with no judgment. It's weird. There's no judgment, just understanding of why you did what you did and why you went through what you did. And yes, there are reparations, there's karma, whatever words we want to use, but there's training to go through it. But even when you get to the other side, no matter how heinous a person has acted, no matter how awful they were, there's no sense of evil there. There's just like, okay, these are the things that you did. These are the people that you hurt. Here's how we start the healing process for you and for those people. There's no eternal punishment, except for what maybe a person might inflict on themselves because of what they did. So in that sense, yes, there are evil actions, there are evil behaviors, there's horrible things that people do to each other. But we need to get to that deeper level of understanding of why, what causes them to behave like that, so that we can start to eradicate that more and more. Because we are living, statistically showing, we are living in the most peaceful, prosperous time in all of human history. And it's getting better and better. So we're doing a good job of our work. And we just need to keep pushing that. We need to keep doing our work and pushing that even more.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard that statistic before, but I think COVID might update the statistic a little bit. I have a feeling that that's outdated. I mean, 17 million dead from COVID. That kind of throws the old statistical analysis. But I think we have seen enough wars and enough manipulation and enough greed and enough genocide and all these things that I would hope most of us take pause before generating more of what we don't want to experience ourselves. I mean, I think there's nothing more powerful than Confucius's golden rule. And I think that, I've said many times they should take the scriptures of the world and replace them with the golden rule and rewrite it 1,000 times so it finally sinks in. Because I think if we could just get that into our psyches and use that as our guiding principle, that the world would be a very different place.
What if we could update? I'm just going to throw this as a question here, no answer. What if we can update the golden rule to something I'm calling the platinum rule? Treat other people how they want to be treated.
Yeah, I think Phyllis. Let me say, on the surface it looks good, but I've known many people in my career that like to be treated in ways that I certainly wouldn't want to be treated. Just like, there's people that like to fight all the time and they enjoy that. And there's people that enjoy stealing and telling lies to wind people up. It's kind of like the Bible commandment, love thy enemy as thyself. But the problem is not very many people really love themselves very well. So how far can that go,
Yep.
So I understand that point. I think one of the things that makes the human life so mysterious is that it is absolutely complex. Human beings are extremely complex creatures. I think we were doing fine until someone slapped a cerebral cortex on top of our limbic system, and now we had this capacity to create all sorts of inventions without looking at the ramifications of them. I think a good example of this is our technological prowess and ability has so accelerated beyond our humanitarian capacities and our capacities for spiritual growth and development, that somewhere along the line we're going to have to figure out how do we upgrade our understanding of meaning and values and relationship and love before we technologically destroy ourselves and have to start, sitting around the campfire. The Aboriginals have a saying, the stars are the campfires of our ancestors. And when we destroy the world, we'll be sitting around the sun, let's call it, the campfire together going, well, we just fucked up another planet. Maybe we should work on moral technologies and ethical technologies and put away the nuclear power and the laser beams for a while.
Yep.
I don't think I didn't get too much of a response out of you on that one. You must either you're in a state of agreement or a state of deep empathy, or both.
All of the above. There's so much work that we've got to do. And that's one of the cool things about the time that we're in as a shadow worker. I get to see all these shadows that are going around all over the place. And to me, it's like, great, we're doing our collective shadow work. This is cool. And part of that is the technology, because we do have to go back and we have to do our inner work, because we can't stop the march of this technology. We just can't. The transhumanism is an inevitability, genetically and technologically. So I am always a proponent of developing spiritual transhumanism, where we move to a higher state of what it means to be human so that we can well adapt to the technological and the genetic changes that are coming.
Yes. I'm a person who's capable of speaking to nature spirits. And it's pretty interesting how nature spirits and fairies, they really have deep concern for human beings. They really they can see that we're in trouble. Obviously their nature, they're the intelligence of nature.
Mm-hmm.
And so they're watching us destroy everything. And it's amazing because one of the things they say to me is, it's so amazing to talk to a human being that can actually see us, hear us, and converse with us. This is amazing. And, it's like they feel so sad because we have gotten so far from our innate abilities. I mean, when you were in a Native American Indian tribe, it wasn't a big deal to talk to the trees or to the plants. I mean, that's how shaman figured out all the recipes for ayahuasca and many other medicines. And medicine men knew how to cure ailments. They didn't need spirit guides coming down from the hospital in the sky. They talked to the plants and the animals, and they said, this plant helps you with that. And so when a guy like me says I talk to nature spirits and stuff, it won't be 5 minutes from this podcast going out that someone's going to be talking crap about me. But the nature spirits are very empathetic because they feel as though we're very lost children that have kind of gotten caught in a material existence, but lost touch with what's inside the material itself. It's almost like a silly joke,
Absolutely. I see that a lot. I know exactly what you're talking about. The nature spirits, some of them I've encountered are really torqued off at the people
Yeah.
because of what's going on. And
Yeah.
others are like, what is wrong with you? What's going on? And it does take that work that we have to do. We still have to remember we are a part of the biosphere of this planet, both the spiritual biosphere and the physical biosphere. We cannot be separated. As long as we're breathing the air and eating the food, drinking the water, we are a part of this planet. And as long as we are existing in the spirit of Mother Gaia, which we need to be respectful of our spiritual neighbors of all kinds.
Well, not only that, if we go to the elementals, the spirits of earth, water, fire, and air, that's exactly what we're made of. So you don't have to go far to talk to a nature spirit. They're breathing you. They're inside of you. They're trying to get you attention to wake you up. In fact, it's them that are saying it's time for you to eat now. And, oh, by the way, you should drink some clean water because they're this is their game, right? Their whole being is about creating the fabric of nature so that it's a living, breathing being, right? Nature, this is the problem with this materialist conception. I think, trees are just wood and plants are just resources and rocks are dead. But people forget that all that's inside of us. And so my point is that the spirits are talking to us all the time. We call them instincts.
Yes.
People forgot. There's another name for instincts. It's the spirits that are trying to hold you together, having a conversation with your brainstem.
Exactly.
For me, I love, this is one of the reasons I love to hang out with you, because I can talk to somebody that I can just totally be myself with. And it's fun for me to let everybody listen in, because if you ever wondered what it would be like if me and Kaedrich were hanging out, you're doing it with us right now. And so if you want to know what it's like to be happily in love with your weird friends who actually pay attention to what's going on inside them and outside of them, this is what it looks and sounds like. Kaedrich, you state that one of the biggest tools of the shadow matrix is artificial fear. A while back, speaking to a friend of mine and multiple-time guest on the podcast here, Jonathan Bluestein, he shared the allegory of, basically what he told me is that the allegory of Plato's cave has been a blueprint for creating illusions for the purpose of control, probably since Plato's writing. So before you begin talking about the shadow matrix and artificial fear, what are your thoughts on what Jonathan Bluestein shared? And he actually sent me a lot of information, and he basically what he said is that when Plato's dialogues came out, if I'm paraphrasing, but he said that a lot of the elites got together and they really were using this as a model for how to control people. I'd love to hear your thoughts about that, because that's really quite a shadow plan, isn't it?
Absolutely. And that's one of the things we have to be critically evaluative about, especially in today's world, is that what we experience as the world can be a construct. Of course, certainly it is a construct of our own perception. But what we think the world is a construct of a lot of factors all around us. I don't look for one smoking gun. I look for a myriad of factors coming together to create a node, to create a nexus point. And we're seeing that with social media, with media, with all of the narratives that are going on in this world. And what we have is a myriad of nexus points where all of these factors are converging. So in a weird sense, we are living in a world of a bunch of different constructed realities that we don't know. Because if we're in one reality, we are reinforced through the cognitive bias, the echo chambers that are all around us to tell us this is how the world works and this is how it is. And if you cannot see outside of that, if you don't have the contrast, you think that this is exactly how the world is and that there's something wrong with everybody else, which is reinforcing the us versus them mentality. Well, they're out to get us because whatever reason, they don't like our freedom. They don't like our religion. They don't like our whatever. They're out to get us. Well, no, they're just people doing their own thing. Then they're probably living in a construct of us versus them sort of thing. So absolutely, the allegory of the cave applies in so many ways that if you cannot get out of that cave, if you can't see that those are shadows being projected against the wall by another source, then you have no means of contrasting it. And that's your entire world until you can finally break free and understand that contrast.
Yeah, it's interesting because what you made me think of is, I've got an 8-year-old and a 4.5-year-old. So they're in a Steiner school. So Thursday is their last day of the week. So Thursday night is usually movie night with mommy and daddy and popcorn. And it's kind of like my chance to just leave work and go have fun and just watch something. But we have over and over selected movies that we thought would be good for the kids, and the predictive programming and the stuff they're putting in these movies is mind-boggling, with transgender stuff, with end of the world stuff. Even we found a Disney movie that was totally twisting the whole biblical narrative and talking about how Satan was abused by God and all these weird concepts. And we're like, oh my God, it's like, no wonder people get their heads screwed up, because there's a lot of people that don't have enough philosophical depth or scriptural study to realize that they're being unconsciously programmed into these types of things. So the reason I think that's relevant is because a lot of what becomes shadows and fears is implanted into people through people that are using very advanced technologies and access to people's minds through story, which, in other words, a lot of parents don't realize how dangerous these stories are.
That is very true. The media, it's a really tricky balance to understand where is the media the reflector, where is it the director, and it's a dynamic interaction back and forth. And where I see, in my scope of things, where I see the media really projecting shadows and creating artificial fear in people is in the paranormal world. Because I've had a lot of people have either told me two things. Either one, they've never had a paranormal experience, or they're so deathly afraid of the paranormal, they don't want anything to do with it. For example, the Ouija board.
Oh,
They'll tell me
yeah.
the Ouija board is like this scary, evil, awful thing that will open a portal to hell and let demons through. And it's like, no, it's just a piece of wood with letters and numbers on it.
Yes.
That's all it is.
It's the same with tarot. People who think tarot's devil's work. Okay, you got a bunch of sheets of paper with pictures on them. How's that devil's work?
Exactly. It's not. It's just exactly. That's all it is. But we are the ones that are creating the experience. Again, similarities attract and perpetuate. And so people have this expectation that a paranormal experience is a scary thing, a book flying across the room, pounding on the walls, and a voice saying, "Get out," when they don't realize that as they're hanging out in their living room, maybe watching TV or reading a book or whatever, and they get this warm, fuzzy feeling of grandma. And they have like this nice memory of grandma. They don't realize that's a paranormal experience of grandma saying, "Hey, I'm thinking
here."
about you. I love you." Right. When they're sitting at a red light, the light turns green and they're still sitting there going, "Why am I sitting here at a green light only to see a car shoot across the intersection that would have killed them?"
Yeah.
They don't realize that's a paranormal experience of a guide saying, "Hold still, don't go yet." They expect it to be this scary, terrible, awful thing, which is the shadows, the artificial fear that the movies put out. And when they're working with me and we start to get rid of that, we start to clear those shadows away and they start awakening their abilities and like, "Wait, you mean that time I woke up in the middle of the night and I learned this and I learned that? That was actually a guide talking to me?" Yes, that's what that was. And so they learn to take back their power because they can rise above the narrative. They transcend that artificial fear because they can see that artificial fear. They see where it's coming from and why it's there. And they go, "Oh, that doesn't apply to me anymore." And it's gone. And so that's how I see artificial fear showing up a lot in a lot of the clients I've been working with at the paranormal level.
If someone says to me that they don't believe in the paranormal, this is how I handle it. Sit quietly, do your best to stop thinking, and tell me where the thoughts are coming from in your head that you don't think you're thinking. And that's the paranormal. That's all these other beings from other dimensions and your loved ones all having a conversation on the same bandwidth that you're on. So if you want to know why you have a hard time stopping your mind to meditate, because you're not alone and many of your friends are invisible.
That's exactly right. One of the things that I still have a hard time reconciling, but my guides have told me over and over, the whispers have told me this so many times, is that 90% of our thoughts and feelings do not originate with us. We think it does, but it doesn't. It's guides talking to us. It's thought forms. It's other kind of entities. It's walking through energy fields and reality bubbles that belong to other things that influence the way we think and feel. And and if you don't have that awareness, you think it's self-generated when it's really just influenced on you.
Well, when you consider that we're 99.99% water by molecular count, and water's got a receptive range of 65 octaves, which is a number so big I can't even tell you the name of it. So my point is, if your body is a radio, your capacity to tune is to almost the entire universe, if not the entire universe. And so when you stick a nervous system in a body of water, you got the world's most sensitive two-way radio. So there's you could say spiritual growth is learning to master the use of your sending and receiving set.
I emphatically agree on that. A big part of spiritual development that I teach people is exactly that. Sitting quietly, quiet your mind, and be aware of the whispers that are going through and recognize where that's coming from. And I teach people how to recognize higher level communication, what it looks like, so that they can get that exactly what you just said. their receptor and their communications going back and forth. And then that interestingly enough, goes right back to what you were saying about what you were learning about money and changing stories. Because if you are around these higher level beings that are giving you higher level transmissions and they're shifting your energy to a higher level state, you're automatically starting to push away that distorted shadow energy just by your state of being, by connecting with these entities.
Yeah, you regulate your frequency, and you're not even attractive to some of these lower level entities anymore. It's just like somebody that wants to go out and have kinky sex usually doesn't look for someone in a white robe that calls themselves a priest, and metaphorically. It's like you don't go up to Mother Teresa and ask her for a wild roll in the hay. It's the wrong frequency. She's going to look at you like, don't you see who I am? It goes really back for me. It all goes back to, what is your dream for yourself? Once you're clear on what your dream is, then you set your parameters of reception and perception. And anything else. See, for me, my dream is my compass bearing. So if weird, shitty thoughts come through my head, I just look at them and say, well, whoever's using my mind right now, please stop pissing on my leg, because this space is not open for the use for that. I just, I'm not interested, but if a person doesn't have anything else to do, they're like someone who can't stop watching the bad news hour all day and junk television. You see, the point I'm making is the person who's wasting their life away playing video games and watching junk and eating junk has not created a dream for themselves that gives them a reason to have values that set the range of perceptual frequency. I'm only going to deal with loving entities that are here to support me and loving people that are here to support me. And the rest of them, they're part of God too, but they can go off and create the kind of stuff that makes them happy. I don't have to be involved in it. If you want to be a drug addict and you want to steal from people, it's not my job to say no. Certainly as a citizen, I have a right to say no from a legal standpoint, but it's not my job to go around, and nor is it yours to go around and tinker inside everybody's brain and say, you got to stop thinking about kinky sex and stealing all the time, because now we're playing God and we're being worse, just as bad as they are. We're stealing their right to their own freedom. Really, at the end of the day, if we can tune our heart and our mind to something that represents a vision for ourselves that is fulfilling, that is worth living for, because if it's worth living for, it's worth dying for. That's when I think that a lot of the otherwise shadow work starts to heal itself, because you just stop tuning into and you recognize the shadows in yourself, because when they come up and you say, that's really not supporting me in having a healthy marriage, or that's not supporting me in being a good parent or a good friend or a good teacher or a good doctor or a good therapist or even a good mechanic. So my point is, I think for everyone listening, it's and I think you'd agree, if you don't have a North Star on your compass, you're really susceptible to not only being enveloped with shadows, but attracting more of it to you, because you're like water coming through something that's not filtered. If you have a good filter, you have a lot more options to where you can get water without getting sick, because the filter does the work of removing the poisons. But if you're letting your body be the filter, then you have to bring the poisons into you. So our dream or our goal for ourselves is really like a filter for a lot of negative energies that ultimately becomes the stuff that people like you and I as therapists have to work people through. I can't get people to heal and change their behavior if I can't establish a dream motive or an objective that takes them up into a state of levity and it's something that they really can put their heart into.
Exactly. One of the techniques I'll share with you that I help people learn to do is on a piece of paper, right at the top of the paper, what your goal state is. Not necessarily that you're making more money or that you're having greater health or you're going to find the right partner, the right relationship partner, but what is it that is the result of having that money? What is the result of having that health? What is your life like when you have that partner? You put that goal state at the top.
Yes.
And then at the bottom, you write what your current goal state is so that you're aware of that contrast. And then I have them spend a few minutes feeling, thinking, experiencing what it's like to be in that goal state. What is it like when you have that money, when you have that health, when you have that partner? What is it like there? Then you could turn your eye inward And is there a belief? Is there an emotion? Is there a feeling that pops up that says, no, 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 you just can't do that because of XYZ? Great, write it down. And the moment that you write that down, you say it out loud. And if it feels silly, if it feels ridiculous that it's there, perfect. You've just released that belief. But if it feels like it's still attached, if it still feels right, well, then you go, well, why do I believe that? And then you go and you write whatever that belief is. And you keep doing that until you get to a place where it feels silly, where it feels ridiculous. And then you go back up through your hierarchy of beliefs. And then any belief, any feeling, emotion that gets in the way, you write it down, say it out loud. Sometimes, a lot of times with shadow work, when you can name the emotion that you're feeling, there's the light. That's the light that you've done to the shadows. When you write down that belief and you put that belief to light and it seems silly, gone. Now, all of a sudden, there's nothing standing in the way between you now and the goal state other than the time it takes to get there.
Yeah. This makes you a goaltender.
Indeed.
Hi, guys. What do you reach for when you want a little pickup, when you want a little happy making? There's lots of things that I used to love. For example, I used to love my espresso in the afternoon, but that caused me lots of problems, so I had to retool that one. There's a lot of things that have sugar in them, but my body hates that. If you want to be healthy and you want to be clean, there's not much you can do. But Organifi's got some new happy drops that, believe me, are really good. And they're simple. They've got passion flower, go-to cola, organic saffron, and ginger root extract. And these things are awesome. You put a couple in your mouth. I like to suck them and let them melt down slow. And in a few seconds, you are feeling happy again with a little mood elevation and a little energy lift too. I absolutely love these things. My kids love them. And the thing I love about them is they make me feel good without doing anything but good for me. So if you want to get some happy drops, go ahead and try these. You're going to be amazed. I absolutely love these things, and my kids love them too, and I know you're going to love them. And you don't have to feel guilty about it because there's nothing in there that's bad for you at all. Far better than an addictive anything, and great for you. Try Organifi's Happy Drops.
To try Organifi's new Happy Drops and to get 20% off your order, go to Organifi.com/Chek20 and use the promo code Chek20 at checkout. That's Organifi.com/Chek20, Organifi.com/CHEK20, and the promo code is CHEK20 for a 20% discount.
What we're talking about technically is making the unconscious conscious. And to have some empathy for people out there that may be really caught in a lot of these types of shadow experiences, it's important for everybody to realize that the unconscious mind is so much more vast than the conscious mind. It's a joke. The analogy I give my patients and my students is, imagine you're in a submarine and the only way you can see is through the periscope. So you got a little tiny telescope tube that goes up with a little lens, and you're looking around, and all you can see at any given moment is what you can see through the periscope. Like I might be just looking at Kaedrich, but I can't see the rest of the world. Well, in this analogy, what you can see through the periscope is what you can be consciously perceptive of, which, according to research, is about 3 to 5% of the total conscious volume in a human being. That means about 97 to 95% of you is unconscious. And, a good example is you don't have to be looking at the sun for the sun to be affecting your life. You don't have to be looking at the moon. And if just because you're not paying attention to the moon and it's in the unconscious, the tides are still moving and it's still mooning and the trees are still growing. So the point I'm driving at here is that the unconscious is radically vast compared to the conscious. And because we're all connected at multiple levels of the collective unconscious, I just want people to know it's okay to have a lot of this stuff in you because, as we said, a lot of it's not even our own. We have to realize that we're in a sea of interconnectedness, not only between human beings, but all sentient beings, and not only in this dimension and not only in the Earth sphere either. You and I are guys that know that we're interacting with beings of other types and dimensions and locales all the time, and they have easily got the ability to communicate right inside of us. So I think if people just realize that whenever you get stuff like this coming through you, the act of writing it down and the act of saying it and the act of looking at it brings it up into the consciousness. But something that I learned studying Ken Wilber's work is that the instant you direct your awareness to it, you add energy to it and it actually changes it. So the act of looking at something dark inside of yourself with the intention to heal or to love is adding an ingredient of love and positive intention to it, so it can never be the same anymore. So every look with positive, loving intention is actually transforming something that could be disabling into something that could actually grow into something that becomes like fertilizer for your dreams, because you actually are in the process of learning how to manage a human mind. And a human mind is very fucking powerful. Like, you think your iPhone's powerful and can get you in trouble. Shit, Steiner said man will continue to invent technologies outside of himself until he either destroys the world or realizes that all the technologies he's created are actually inferior copies to the technologies within himself. And that is damn true. Like, we got cell phones and we got wireless this and we got wireless. Without a long physiology explanation, I can show you that everything that's inside of us is far more advanced than anything we've created on the outside of us. In fact, you think nuclear weapons are powerful? Look at how much energy is produced by one mitochondria in a human cell. Look at the electrical output of that, multiply it by the number of cells in your body, and you've got something that produces more energy than the sun in your body every day.
Absolutely. And one of the things that you said that I really like is when you do that introspection, when you look at those shadowy, distorted places inside, do it with compassion, do it with grace. And I even tell people to do it with gratitude, because you learned those shadows. You picked up those distortions because they saved your butt at some point in life. They helped you. They helped you survive to fit in. And if you look at those distortions, you look at those shadows with disgust, with shame, with hatred, even, those things are just going to dig in deeper. They're going to dig in tighter and they're going to come back stronger. But if you look at it with understanding and grace and compassion, saying, cool, this is who I needed to be at that time, who I needed to be at that moment in life, but I'm not that anymore. So thank you for letting me get through that. It's like suddenly those distortions just fade away. They just undistort and they become the natural state of energy that they are, just through that awareness and that gratitude. It's amazing how powerful that can be, just that awareness.
Exactly. One comment I left for you in the notes there is that I think it's interesting. It's from alchemy. I've studied alchemy a lot and developed my own system of alchemy called Chek Life Process Alchemy. In one of the books, I think it's Dennis Huck's book. I forgot. It's got a 3-part name. It's either Alchemy for Idiots or Alchemy for Dummies. But he gives a phenomenal description of the dragon in alchemy. But really, the dragon is really the spirit of God. But he talks about, in alchemy, they talk about the dragon, which is spirit itself, and how it's trapped in matter. But he describes that the spirit, or the dragon, is in the trees, it's in the rocks, it's in the, it's in everything. If you think of God as the ultimate creative genius that loves to create every possible conceivable way to experience itself, to express itself, that a lot of what we're doing is we're extracting the unconditional love out of the conditional matrix that makes form. And when we realize that if we're in a state or a form that isn't congruent with what we want to be, that by taking that energy and putting new information, like the dream, the goal, or the objective is the information. So you put energy in formation. So the act of looking in and finding the dragon and where the dragon's trapped in us and releasing it from that configuration in and saying, okay, now that I've freed this self-doubt in myself, I have this energy available to do positive things. So the whole point of alchemy is to extract the spirit out of matter and become conscious. So ultimately you reach the point where you don't need a physical body to be a conscious spiritual being. And I think that really the whole thing about shadow work is really extracting the dark aspects of the dragon out of ourselves and setting that energy free into something that we can be the author of, instead of being, the victim of the circumstances of our early life and our period of programming.
Absolutely. And that's one of the critical concepts is the dragon isn't everything. Source energy, God energy is everything. You're not separable from it because it is what it is. It's everything. But it gets distorted and it feels separated when it gets distorted. It feels like it's pulled out and it's no longer source energy. Sometimes these things get a little misguided, a little thrown off. But again, once you go into that and you start clearing that, but what if that is exactly what the God energy wants to experience, those distortions? What if that's part of our existence? And it's just going to be more philosophical here. What if part of our existence here on Earth is to experience those distortions, to create those distortions, and like you said, pull the universal love, the unconditional love out of that? What if that's the work that we're here to do? I'll give you a strange example. With my ex-wife, she had a friend years ago, many years ago, was a single mom with 3 kids. And one of the kids was severely disabled, mentally and physically disabled. And it was, like I said, a single mom. And I felt such heartfelt compassion. And I reached out to guides. I reached out to whatever I could, said, is there something I can do to help? Is there a way that I can intervene? Can I bring some energy? Can I bring some healing to this? And I kid you not, that child in a wheelchair reached out like telepathically, energetic to me and said, please stop. Don't do that. I know your heart's in the right place, but my mom and I agreed to come into this life to experience this hardship together. And if you interfere out of compassion, you're going to be delaying what we need to learn, what we need to experience. So please just let us have this pain. Let us get through this one. And that was an eye opener for me. I was just like, wow, you came into this world to experience that. And so I've learned that sometimes souls are here to endure some of this stuff so that God can experience itself in that way. And I always like to look at it as, what can we extract from that? Can we heal ourselves? Like if it's happening to us, we can heal ourselves. We get that permission. And then we go through that process like, oh, that's what you came here to learn, that distortion and how to undistort it.
Yes, when I teach medical dowsing, one of the first things I teach is that you must always connect to the soul of the person you're working with and ask if you have permission to douse them and you have permission to do this healing work with them because of exactly that reason. And I've found through years and years of studying and researching this stuff and working with people and all the things that I do, that interestingly, the more advanced a soul is, oftentimes the tougher the life path they take in the world. If I walk into the gym and I warm up and I'm deadlifting 500 pounds, and you tried to do that, you could really get hurt. But it took me years and years of training to be able to lift like that. But if I lowered my workout to yours, we'll call it the everyday happy-go-lucky life with rich parents and no problems, I wouldn't grow. So souls often come into the world and take life paths like you've just described that are very challenging because they're like the weightlifter that can lift 500 pounds. They need something that's at their level of challenge to grow. And it's a hard pill for a lot of people to take because they don't have enough spiritual depth to realize that souls are at different levels of evolution and need challenges of a different level. And I've spoken to my soul about why there's so many starving people in the world and things like that. And my soul said, you don't realize that a lot of those people are very evolved souls that are actually in the final stages of their evolution as a human being in a physical body, and they're here to learn to drop the body. So they chose to be born in Africa or Ethiopia or some of these places specifically so they could overcome the desire for hunger and overcome the desire for a physical body, and they will be probably guardian angels in a next lifetime or working at higher levels of the creative matrix. So it's very hard for us from an emotional, empathic state to look at a lot of the hardships in the world. But like you've just pointed out, it's important for us to realize that different people are different souls coming here for different experiences. And it can be a mistake to try to rescue somebody
from what looks to you like something terrible, but may be just a lesson. Like a good example is when I was a fighter. Every time I'd go to the damn doctor because I had neck problems or whatever, the doctor would say, you got to stop fighting. When I would get hurt racing motocross, you should never do that. You shouldn't ride motorcycles. They'd always tell me to stop doing the things that I love to do. Well, to them, getting hit in the face was to us like watching someone starve. They thought it was a bad thing, and we think it's a bad thing. And I'm not condoning it or saying that we should just let people starve to death. I'm simply saying that we have to understand that there's a lot more depth and a lot more layers to the reality that we live in than most of us can comprehend, is what I'm saying.
Absolutely. And what may seem as a heaven to one could be a hell to another.
Exactly, yes.
I saw that with a client. It was an older lady, just moved into a house, and she made it all nice and beautiful. And she was having a problem with the spirit in the house. Things were falling down, things were breaking. She got the creep out feeling. There was a problem with the spirit. And so I reached out, kind of felt around, and I'm like, I'm getting the feeling of a biker. And she's like, yeah, there was a 1%er biker that lived here before I was here. Always had loud music. The neighbor said he was just very rough, very difficult to deal with. And then he died. And I bought the place and I moved in. And I'm like, well, he's still there. And he hates what you've done with the place.
That's so funny. And he would too.
Absolutely. He hated it. So we created a little portal to a place where, there's lots of loud music, there's loud motorcycles, there's fighting, there's drinking, there's people yelling at each other. And she's like, I don't want to send him to hell. Why would we send him to hell? And I'm like, no. You don't understand. That's heaven to him. And she's like, but that would be hell to me. I'm like, you're right. If you went there, that would be hell for you. But to him, that was heaven. And sure enough, he wasn't ready to go. We opened that portal, he wasn't ready to go. So I had her amp up that frilly feminine energy so that it was really uncomfortable to him. He was gone in a flash to his heaven, and she hasn't had a problem since.
I remember I was listening to one of Osho's lectures. He said, when I die, I'm not going to go to heaven. That's boring as hell. He says, I'm going to go to hell. That's where all the action's at. I remember I was listening to it in the gym, and I just started cracking up because, it was just sort of an interesting perspective on it. But I guess it depends on what one's perspective of heaven and hell are, but it was funny. Now, can you speak to the nature of the true self and how it's obstructed by shadows and how your conception of the shadow self relationship correlates with Wetiko as shared by Paul Levy in his books on Wetiko? Because as I read through your outline, I'm like, wow, Kaedrich almost got a perfect parallel for Wetiko because I've read all Paul Levy's books and it's almost bang on, mirror image.
Yeah, I do like Paul Levy's work. His Wetiko stuff is amazing. I love his presentation of that. And that's exactly it, is the true self. We came here into this world as a higher level being or a being just to experience what we're here to experience. But the shadows of our family, the shadow matrix, these entities, whatever that we get aligned to, throw us off course. We build up a false facade. It's like a mask that we wear of this person who we think we're supposed to be. And this person who we think we're supposed to be was created basically to accommodate other people's comfort zones so that we could adapt, we could live, we could function, we could live in our family, we could live in school, we can go to churches, we could exist within the office place, the corporate environment. But it's not true to yourself. It's not true to who you are.
Right.
And as you do your shadow work, you start to realize what you took on, what you started to accept. And it's almost like these shadows that we pick up feel just like globs of energy, just globular energy, clogging up our energy fields. And as you start to slough off what's not yours, you start to clear away the stuff that doesn't belong to you. You start to radiate with your own energy, your own authentic energy. And this is where it gets a little tricky. One of the things that we were not told about spiritual growth, and that I'm still trying to emphasize to people, that as you really get into your spiritual growth and your spiritual development, it becomes a destructive process. The things that worked for you, the people that worked for you, don't anymore. The people around you start going, what is wrong with you? You used to be so cool. You used to be so much fun. I used to understand you. Now you're just weird. And so the people and the jobs and the situations will fall apart. And sometimes it will create a dark night of the soul. where everything just crashes and you hit rock bottom. And I have seen higher self with a number of people hit that reset button.
Mm.
But that's a part of how you become your true self, because when you get through all of that, when you start healing that, when you start radiating with your own authentic energy, you bring the right job to you, you bring the right people to you, you bring the right situation to you that augment your energy, that just resonates with you, and suddenly life makes sense. Life is like you have a purpose and you're living that purpose. And that is your true self. That's who you came here to be. And a part of that is creating like that North Star, that compass, finding out what your values are, living, breathing, and being those values without ever having to tell anybody what they are. That's the cool thing, is you don't have to tell people your values. You just live it, and people pick up on that and they know it. And that's what the true self is.
Yes, and Steiner actually says most people will not take the spiritual path because it is crazy making. And what he's really saying is that the path of true spiritual development requires that you look into everything about yourself and come face to face with it. But most people have so much not self within the domain, like veils around the self, that to do the work to penetrate all that literally is crazy making. You know, it's like someone who does too much psychedelics and gets caught in a very similar experience to the dark night of the soul, and they feel like they can't get out, like they can't find their way back to what we would say a normal sense of themselves, because they've opened up too much of the unconscious, and they don't have the skills to navigate that much upflow of unconscious energy and information. And this is why Jung was concerned about so many Americans doing yoga, because he realized the power of all these breathing exercises and asanas was it could cause the kundalini to rise, which would trigger them to be so overwhelmed by the unconscious mind that they don't really have a context for it, because we don't have a cultural container for that experience. So, nobody, I've never met a Christian yet that got kundalini rising in church, but I've met people that have gone to yoga. I've met people that have gone to yoga for the first time and had kundalini rising in one session and spent years trying to deal with the backlash.
Right.
The spiritual path is crazy making, but it is, like you said, when you're going to create something new, you've got to sometimes destroy the old. And I think that's why in the Eastern religions, there's gurus to guide you, because they already have done the crazy making and they know exactly what's going to happen. And the problem is we don't have a lot of very enlightened guides in the West. We just don't. At the end of the day, as soon as you have a dream, goal, or intention that ultimately brings love and joy to other people's lives, you're already on the spiritual path, whether you know it or not.
Absolutely, because that brings you to that higher state of awareness. This is what I call an alpha point. That moment of awakening where you know that you can be more, that you know that there's something different for you. You might not know what it is. You might not even know how it's going to happen, but you know that there's something more to it, that there's even better. And that's, to me, is that point where higher self goes and poke, wake up. You're more than that. And then you spend that life, you have that free will as a 3D being. As a 3D being, you have the free will of pursuing that spiritual path or saying, no, not for me. But meanwhile, higher self is going to be gently, persistently poking you along the way, saying, hey, wake up. Hey, here, try this. Hey, go do that. Go do this. And as a 3D being, you have the choice to ignore it or to follow suit with it. But the kind of fun thing is that higher being has a vested interest in you doing that. So it's always going to hang out. So pay attention to it. It's a good thing for you.
Well, Kaedrich, we've had a great dialogue, and what I'd like to do as we wrap it up is just talk about some of the things that we can start doing to mitigate the effects of the shadow matrix and its effects on us and our own shadow. We've highlighted a few things along the way. I think, for example, we talked about taking time to just be quiet each day. I talk about the three qualities of the soul: abiding, which is the eternal witness in us; reflecting, looking back, how did your day go? What went well? What didn't go well? Where did you say or do things that you wish you hadn't had because they weren't really an authentic expression of who you choose to be in the world? And we can also start a shadow journal. If you want to share some things so that the listeners can really have the option to get engaged in some shadow work, what other things would you like to put on the table?
It's like you were saying, it's all about making the unconscious conscious. It's about bringing light where there is darkness. And I really think one of the best things to do for that is maintain your energy hygiene. Just like we brush our teeth daily, hopefully. We take
Yeah,
showers regularly. We're doing our physical hygiene. So important for physical health. For our energetic health, we do the same thing. We balance chakras if that'll work for you. You clear energies away from you, clear them out of you. You bring yourself up to a higher state of being. You move yourself to this higher state of existence. There's something I love to do. I call it exalting. And how we do exalting work is think about a time and a place where something was sacred to you. Could
mm,
be a church, could be a temple, could be somewhere in nature. But you be aware of how that feels and recognize that that feeling is actually activating the divine spark within you. And you can breathe into that feeling and make it stronger, make it even bigger. And when you do that, you're actually bringing sacred energy into you. And the more you have of that, the more you're vibing at that higher level. I hate using those terms, but we'll use it. The more you're vibing at that higher level, the less likelihood some of these distorted energies can even mess with you. But when you exalt it, is you are aware of that sacred feeling, you're aware of that sacred setting, and then you bump it up a level. And you have to realize that bumping it up is just beyond your imagination. You can barely imagine what this is like. You can barely imagine what that feeling of energy is like. And as you keep doing that, you're going to keep raising that level to a higher state because now you can imagine you've experienced it. So you keep raising that to that higher level. And that starts to shift your energy overall so that these things can't glom onto you. They can't stick to you. And while you're doing that, what we talked about before, sit and be silent. Just listen to the whispers going through your mind. And as you stop your thinking, like I love the way you put that, you stop your thinking. Well, what is doing this thinking for me? Where am I getting this from? And become discerning. Be very discerning about it. In working with the paranormal, one of my rules is test and validate everything, question everything. I love it when I have clients that come to me and says, I feel like I've been getting these messages, I've been getting these energy flashes, but I don't know if I'm going crazy or not. That's kind of one of the things I look for. If somebody comes to me and they're like, oh, I know this is a demon doing this, and I know it's a demon doing that, and I've tried this and nothing ever works. I'm like, well, maybe this isn't the right place for you. So whatever those messages are coming, question, test them, see how they're working for you. If they don't, move, just keep going. And at the energetic level, just doing that will start to have a dramatic shift in you. And it's got to be a daily thing. The analogy that I use for this is imagine the energy of your body, your being, is like you have a glass of water, but you want to put sacred energy into that. So that's like a bottle of wine. So you want to turn that water into wine. You can't dump the water out. You just can't. But what you can do is you can pour wine into that glass. And the more you pour that wine into the glass, the more you start displacing that water. And the more you start filling up that glass with sacred energy. And that's what you're doing when you do this work. You're shifting out of that distorted energy to a higher frequency energy, your own energy, because nobody can tell you what's sacred. Only you can experience it
exactly.
at the subjective level. So that means you are creating yourself as a sacred being in the world just by doing that.
Yeah, for me, what's sacred is what my life depends upon. And the soul is relationships, top to bottom. So when we're talking about shadow healing, everything that's in our shadow, we're in a relationship with. So it's really about deciding which relationships are congruent to who you're choosing to be now, and then knowing whether they be relationships with invisible entities talking through you, or whether they be relationships with people, or relationships with things that don't serve you anymore, such as addictive foods, addictive games, any such thing, even addictive activities or behaviors. Then it's just a matter of asking yourself, is that who I choose to be now? Because we always have the choice. Like there really is, past and future are mental constructs. Now is the only real reality there is. So no matter what happened 5 minutes ago, if you have a vision for yourself in the now, you can always change and say, okay, that thought I just had about so and so wasn't really very loving or respectful or whatever, but I can say to myself, I can forgive myself for feeling that way, And I can also say, I will choose now to see as much love and beauty in that person as I just put the effort into seeing what I don't like about them. And I think that's a real honest spiritual step into healthy shadow work, because most people don't take the effort to say, okay, let me flip the coin on that. I just said 5 nasty things about this guy or this woman, but let me see if I can find the equal and the opposite, because for the negative to exist, the positive by definition has to exist. So I think if we take that as a concept and say, wherever we find negatives in ourselves, others, or persons, places, or things, look for what the positive is, even if you have to potentiate it. Say, well, that person has the potential to be a nice, loving person. Like Bill Gates has the potential to do as much healing work in the world as he has destruction. But maybe it takes the collective of us to inspire him by using our conscious intentions to support him in awakening to his own potential. But if we just wait for Bill Gates to have a moment with Jesus, it could be a long wait.
That's true. And that is the key factor, is we can only change ourselves. We can't change anybody else unless they're ready to work together with us.
Hi, I wanted to jump in here and let you know that this year marks the 20th anniversary of the now iconic book that started it all, How to Eat, Move and Be Healthy by Paul Chek. This special milestone marks 2 decades of the book guiding individuals on their journey to holistic health. And in that time, we have brought out 2 editions as well as versions in Swedish and Dutch. If you already have a copy, you will know that it is full of Paul's timeless and tested advice, and it has helped thousands of readers as Paul gets letters and emails from people all over the world. But did you know that the idea for the book came to him because he would have to repeat the same instructions over and over each time he took on a new client? So he decided to put his key coaching points into a book so he could help more than one person at a time. Fun fact, the book was initially going to be called Flatten Your Abs Forever, and the first draft was so long that the standing joke in our office was that all you had to do was lie on the floor with the book on your stomach and you would have instant flat abs. In honor of the 20th anniversary, I am thrilled to announce that we are releasing 2 exclusive versions of this book. The standard commemorative edition is perfect for first-time readers looking to discover the book for the first time, or those loyal followers who want to revisit it again. And for those who seek something truly unique, we present the special collector's edition, an exclusive limited number with each book personally signed by Paul himself. Hurry, as both commemorative editions will be a limited print run. So to get your copy of the 20th anniversary edition of How to Eat, Move and Be Healthy, go to chek.group/eatmove20. That's chek.group/eatmove20.
Being here in the present is so valuable. It's so important. A number of my clients have been like these type A personalities that are always on the go, go, go. I can be that way too. I've always got this to do, that to do, this to do, that to do. And when we recognize that being on the go, go, go is sometimes bypassing, that what we need to do is sit with a heartache, sit with the anger, sit with the awful feeling. I've had some dramatic turnarounds with some clients when I got them to actually put on their schedule a half hour of feeling like crap.
Yeah, exactly. I have a technique like that. I call it having a worry box. And it's amazing when people do this. Every single time I've given it this exercise to people, they've all said, wow, this is mind-blowing how well this works. And I usually give it to people that have a hard time meditating. I say, look, here's what I want you to do. Go get an old Kleenex box or something. And what I want you to do is carve out 5 or 10 minutes each day. And I want you to fucking worry like a pro. Instead of doing this half-assed worrying all the time that stop you from really becoming who you want to be, write down everything you're worried about. So worry for 5 or 10 minutes and write down what it is. But after your worry break is over, you fold the piece of paper up and you put it in the worry box. And you know that you have an agreement that stays in the box until you're done with your meditation or your self-reflection time. And you know that you can trust that it's in the vault. And then when you're done, spending your 20 minutes or even if it's 10 minutes, just being present with yourself and relaxing your mind and just being a witness to it all and not getting entangled in it, you can pick up your worry paper out of your box and you can look at it. And people say to me all the time, I realize that I've just been obsessing about this for nothing. I've been worried about this shit all my life and it's never done a goddamn thing. And so they realize that when you go through the exercise of worrying with like a pro, getting serious about it, really winding yourself up, and then turning it over to the worry box and put it in the vault and be brave enough to let it go, you actually can realize how a lot of this stuff is insignificant. It's just a habit. It's like like learning to swing a golf club incorrectly. And then you got to go get training to learn how to swing it correctly because you've got a bad habit. When people worry like a pro, they realize how draining it is. And they go, geez, this is not very fun. I don't really enjoy doing this. So a good analogy is when I work with people in therapy, oftentimes, for example, I might be working on their neck, but they don't realize they're holding their neck really tight and I can't even move their head. So if I tell them to relax, they go, well, I am relaxed. And because their sense of themselves is so, they're so detached from themselves. So what I do is I say, I want you to push your head into my hands firmly. And I hold that pressure for 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 12 seconds. And then I say, now relax. But what I've done is I've taken the tension to a new high level where they're conscious of it. So when they relax, they're aware that they're letting the muscle go. But before they didn't realize that they were in a state of hypertension. But once you give them a high level of tension, then they can relax. So when you really worry like a pro, you bring yourself into a state of high tension with a lot of negative energy and you have to sit in it, which, in The Alchemist, they call that sitting in the fire. And then you can step back from it and you go, wow, that feels good to be done with that. In fact, it feels so good. I don't want to fucking do that anymore. And so some of these little techniques are very, very powerful.
And what you were talking about, the stiff neck, there's a shadow version of that. As a shadow worker, like if I have somebody has like a constant pain or a tightness going on, what we will literally do is have a conversation with a neck, have a conversation with a tightness in the shoulder. What does it want to say? And I get a lot of times, well, it doesn't want to say anything. It's just there. And I'm like, great. What if you could imagine it was talking to you? What would it say? And then we have this great dialogue. And then when they find out, oh, that was there from this time in my life. I put that tension there at that time in my life. And I'm like, great, let's get to know that tension. What is it doing? How is it protecting you? What's so wonderful about you that it wants to keep safe? And then we focus on the energy shift and we do the energy shift there. And all of a sudden I'm like, oh, that's what it feels like to relax. Oh, that's what it feels like. It's because that shadow energy finally got the attention that it needed. It finally got that awareness to it that it's been calling for. And they realize, no, that tension in my neck wasn't trying to hurt me. It was just a part of my psyche calling out for attention through the body.
Yes, exactly.
One of my favorite techniques that I start everybody with, because I've got some really complex stuff and stuff that it has to be one-on-one guidance through, but one of my favorite techniques that anybody could do is start off with something innocuous and something easy, like a behavior that somebody does that just annoys you. Doesn't matter who does it. Just if you see a certain behavior, it drives you nuts. What I want you to do is sit with that feeling. Let yourself feel that feeling of irritation, that annoyance. Breathe into it. Make it stronger on purpose. Make it stronger on purpose. And then scan your body and notice where in your body you're holding that irritation feeling. And again, breathe into that spot of your body, make it even more uncomfortable. Just like get yourself to the point you're like, I can't stand it. And then bring your awareness into that. And then ask that part of your body, because that part of your body is holding on to the memory of when you first learned to feel that way. And ask that part of your body when and where you learned to feel that way, and let yourself be surprised. The reason why I say that is I'll guide people through this process. And before we start, they're like, oh, I know exactly. That was when I was in 6th grade and this happened.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, okay, that you could be right. Or that could be just another manifestation of that moment. So just let yourself be surprised. And as they do it, they'll find something like when they were a baby, even before they could even talk, something happened. And I'm like, there it is. And then just weirdly enough, just that awareness of when and where you first learned to feel that way is enough to shed that light onto it. And then that shadow energy starts to dissolve and you can become aware of that part of you that it was helping. It's just amazing how that works.
It is, and having used that approach for various other reasons and those, one of the things that I find helpful when people say, I don't like, if you say, okay, you're holding a lot of tension in your abdominal muscles, go back and see if you can find where that's coming from or what it wants to say to you. And they'll say, well, I don't know. It's just, I don't get anything. What I find helps is I say, put your hand on it, touch it, use your feminine hand. So if you're right-handed, it's your left hand. Usually it's the feminine hand. If you're left-handed, it'll be your right hand. Put your feminine hand on that and touch it as though it was somebody else's abdomen. And I want you to play a little game with me. If you couldn't see anything, you were blindfolded, but you were just meeting somebody new for the first time, and you touched that abdomen, start telling me what you would think you were learning about this person by touching that part of their body. And they might say, well, they feel like they're worried they're going to get punched, or they're nervous about something, or they're in a hurry. And I'll say, good. So let's talk about those aspects of yourself. Have you ever been worried you were going to get punched? Is there something you're nervous about? Are you in a hurry about something? And almost always they go, oh my God, yes, exactly. And they start, then the floodgates just open up.
Absolutely. Isn't that cool? And you said one of the key things that I tell my clients all the time, make it a game. Because if we take it too seriously, if we start expecting certain results, we're going to fudge it. We're going to mess it up. And consequently, that's one of my rules of interacting with the paranormal. Have fun with it. Play with it. Because when you let go of expectations, you open to so many other possibilities of what it could be. And again, it is silly talking to a part of your body. It is silly imagining the abdomen with somebody else's. And when you can accept that it's silly, then you're like, cool, I can play with this. And then all of a sudden the information flows and it's like, oh, and you wouldn't have gotten if you were taking it too seriously.
Well, one of the reasons things like that seem silly to people is because they're so detached from the child within themselves. They've become too serious about everything and too encrusted into the mundane world of the average individual. When we lose touch with our child, we lose touch with the beginner's mind. We lose touch with the sense of wonder and exploration. And so I often find myself having to do soul recovery to help bring the child back into people. And I've got a podcast that I've done with Angie on soul recovery. It's very, very powerful. So people might want to listen to my podcast with Angie Chek on soul recovery. We're in a situation where kids are being pushed into so much adult responsibility and expectations with academics and homework and getting good grades and not having enough time to play and all these other factors that a lot of kids don't really get to have a childhood, or adults forget that it's important that if you transcend, you've got to include. So if you become an adult and you don't include the child, you become a sick adult. If you transcend to a higher consciousness, like world-centric consciousness, but you lose we-centric consciousness, you can find yourself constantly working to save the world, but destroying your family relationships and having no time for yourself. So it's very important that when you're doing this work, that if you're going to transcend, you have to include what came before so you don't lose your roots, because that's what happens. People lose their roots and they just become a cog in the wheel.
Absolutely. And it's that transcension process. I kind of almost, instead of the roots, I like to call it the primacy of being.
Yes. Well, that's what the roots are. It's really it's giving yourself permission to be without having to do. And you know me well enough to know I'm a friggin' busy guy, but I take time to go to the gym every day. I go sit in my sauna and meditate every day. And if I'm too tired to meditate, I take a nap or I talk to my soul, and then I take a cold plunge and I eat real food. So even though I'm busy, I build my business around what I call sacred time. And I think a lot of people have foregone the sacred. I mean, the sacred is, as I said, what your life depends upon. And if you don't make time to be with yourself, and you don't take time to buy and eat real food and drink clean water and put your feet on the earth, what happens is you actually become a living replica of the pathology of society, while often sitting there criticizing it, not realizing that you're as caught in it as they are. And so the key point that I'm making here is shadow work is only done by people that truly want to heal, grow, and become something more authentic of themselves, which is itself a sacred process. But that process cannot be done if you don't anchor yourself in healthy rituals, because you won't have the energy to do it, and you won't have the confidence in yourself that you've met your core survival needs. Because if your body's not getting enough love, if your mind is too busy, if you're constantly worried that you can't pay the bills, then you're not really taking time to be. You're always caught in some kind of projection of what you need to be, should have been, would have been, could have been, or didn't do. And that's just how you stack more shadow on than you can clear out with your vacuum cleaner every day.
Exactly. And one of the techniques I have for navigating through that is what I call interruptive processing. You're aware of what you're thinking, you're aware of what you're feeling, but you shift it over. For example, when we know we need to be eating healthier, when we know we need to be having some of these better stories, one of the things that we tell ourselves is, oh, I'm going to be happy when I lose 20 pounds.
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
going to
Or
be
make so
happy
much
when
money.
I lift this. I'm going to be happy when this happens. And what you're actually doing is telling your subconscious, I'm not happy now. Things aren't good now. And then your subconscious goes, well, fine. If you're not happy and things aren't good now, then why do I even bother? Why should we even do these things to make things good? Because we're not happy anyway. Whereas if you can catch yourself, I'll be happy when this happens, you go, wait, what am I happy about right now? What's awesome about the way things are right now? What feels good in my body right now? And then we have the gratitude for that, and we focus on that energy and we build that energy. And that leads us to find more, oh, I'm happy here. One of my favorite bands, Gogo Bardello, has this great line in one of their songs. There are no good old days. They are today, they are tomorrow. Why curse the future with such sorrow?
Yeah.
So interrupt it. Catch yourself when you say, oh, things are going to be great when this happens. Well, how are things great now? And then that similarities will attract and perpetuate and build up, and you'll get more of that.
Yes.
One of the best things, of course, is recognize that you're under the influence of various things. You're under the influence of energies and entities around you. So if you are bumping your energy up into that higher state, you'll get the positive influence. But don't assume that you're beyond all of that. There are times, even though I've been doing this work for a long time and I work on this stuff, there are times where I've caught an attachment on me. And I've had to stop and go in and like, why is this thing attached? Why is this here? What's going on? What do I feel I need from that attachment? So be willing to accept that you can be under the influence of these things. Because if you say, no, I'm in this perfect state, I'm perfectly protected, no, nothing can happen to me, you're actually leaving yourself open and vulnerable to that. But when you open to the possibility that you could be, you're going to take that extra care. And the same way about social media and the narratives that are all around there, if you instantly go, well, no, I'm super wise and I can look and I can see and they can't influence me because I can see what's going on, again, that arrogance could get you in trouble. Where if you recognize, like, oh, I am a human being, still, I make 100% of my choices emotionally, and you justify that emotion with what logic you have, then when you see those narratives playing out there, if you feel something tug on your heartstrings, that's a chance for you to go, oh, why is that tugging my heartstrings? Why is that riling me up? Why is that agitating me? Go into that. Is it really something that sings to the core of your being? Is it something really at the core value of who you are? Because it might be. You might be finding something that you resonate with, or it might be, oh, hey, there was a moment I felt the influence of that. Oh, good job. Look at what you're doing. How awesome. Okay, I see that influence. So be open to the fact that you can be influenced to one degree or another. And weirdly enough, that acceptance of that possibility is what empowers you to rise above that potential influence and control.
Absolutely. It's a real good idea for people to do a sage clearing. You can buy a sage bundle on Amazon or any number of places that have health foods and healing source. Sage has a very high power energy when you burn it, and the smoke has a sort of an effect of evaporating negative energies. It literally, you can feel them blowing right out of you. You just need a little fan. You can get a smudge fan, which is usually made with some feathers. And I recommend starting by letting the sage smoke rise up between your legs into your root chakra, which comes out straight between in your crotch, between your rectum and your sex organs. So between a woman's vagina and rectum, a man's testicles and rectum, that's where the root chakra projects energy out. So just letting that smoke rise up between your legs and then blowing it, if you don't know where the chakras are, just along the whole front of your body that would follow your spine all the way up to the crown of your head, and then getting someone to blow it on the back of your body. If you relax, you'll feel when you've got stuff that needs to be cleared, it'll feel like the energy of the smoke is being absorbed into your body. But when you're clear, all of a sudden it'll feel like an energy explosion, like the energy bursts out of your body. So that's how I can always tell when I'm cleared a chakra, because the energy pushes back at me. So I'm feeling it as I'm clearing it. So you might have your hand that's holding the sage and the other hand that's running the fan, but all of a sudden you feel energy pushing back. Once the energy pushes back, that's a sign that the energy's balanced and clear there. Dr. Nick from Essential Oil Wizardry makes a great oil called Psychic Protection. You can get it in tincture format or oil format. And mixing that with some skin cream and wearing it, especially if you're going to be around stressful people or in chaotic areas like bars and, going to group ayahuasca sessions where you have people carrying entities and stuff, putting psychic protection on can be very, very helpful. I like to vaporize it. I'll just put one drop. It's quite powerful. So I just put one drop on some tobacco and herbs with some flower essences. And then the psychic protection comes. And I use that if I'm doing astral travel and things like that. Again, getting your feet on the earth, your bare feet on the earth regularly to bleed off electromagnetic energies and just reconnect to the earth is very good, because if you get too much electromagnetic energy in your body, it actually vibrates your whole body and it stresses your systems. And you can have what are a lot of negative thoughts and feelings, but you don't realize that you're actually hearing the stress of your own cells. They're expressing their concern or their sadness or their hunger or their frustration or their toxicity. So bleeding that energy off. Also, you can get grounding mats so that when you sleep at night, your body's grounded, and that bleeds a lot of electromagnetic stress off. One thing that I do that I've done for many, many years, I have pictures of people all over my office. Like right there's Carl Jung. I've got Arthur M. Young. I've got David Bohm. I've got Jean Gebser. I've got Yogananda. I've got Sri Yukteswar, Lahiri Mahashai, Babaji, Krishna, Jesus, Buddha, many, many others. The Black Madonna. Some of them I painted myself just because they were important to me. But I surround myself with pictures of the souls that I want to embody, because there's something about that person that inspires me. Like if I really want to be a deep thinker and a spiritually oriented scientist, then I bring David Bohm into my consciousness. If I really want to reach my potential to get next to God, I could bring Babaji or Yogananda into my consciousness. If I really want to reach my potential as an educator and an inventor, I can bring Arthur M. Young. If I want to ride big waves, I can bring Laird Hamilton into my body. So having people around us so that because a person's picture is an antenna that connects to the soul of that individual. So believe it or not, when you're looking at the image of a Yogananda or a Babaji, you're actually connecting to them through the non-local network, which everybody and every soul that was ever created is connected, and because you're connecting through God consciousness, and there's nothing that isn't contained there. An art therapy technique that I use is whenever you're feeling frustrated, angry, disappointed, emotionally imbalanced, just get out some color pens or crayons or color pencils or any medium that you can get access to, and just without thinking about it, just express on paper exactly what you feel. If you're angry, then draw or paint the anger as it is. Don't edit it whatsoever. And so then what you do is you look at it. Now that you've externalized it, you've moved that psychic energy out of your body and it's taken shape so you can actually see it. So the invisible becomes visible. And then what I say is, now just look at it and don't feel like you got to do this in a hurry. I call this exercise turning shit into flowers. Think, now, what can I add to this to make it beautiful? So, if it's something that you think you can turn into a compost pile, then draw some flowers growing out of the compost, maybe a big sunflower, and put a sun up in the sky. And the act of letting your negative emotions, your judgments, your sadness, your fear come out and be embodied on paper literally takes the unconscious, moves it out, gives it a location, and it allows you to look at it. And then the act of saying, I'm going to convert this into something of beauty or something of value or meaning to me, then let your creativity figure out how you can manipulate that. And it might be that you paint over it with another color and start something new, knowing that you use that as the background for something beautiful. You buried it and created a background out of it. But the key thing here is just taking the initiative to begin to move these energies out of your body, these thoughts, these feelings, emotions, give them a body separate from yours on the paper or the canvas, and then say, now I'm going to use my spiritual capacity to take something that has a negative orientation and convert it into something with positive intention. And that's why I call it turning shit into flowers, because it was shitty while it was in you, but now you're learning to do that. And many of my patients have said, from doing that exercise, I got to the point where I didn't even need to paint anymore. I could just, be standing in line at the grocery store, hear somebody saying stuff that I thought was just irritating as hell, and I couldn't believe they were talking that way, or maybe, being rude to their child or something. And I was able to actually do the conversion inside of myself right then and there. So you get to the point where you learn to clean on the spot. You don't wait, until you've blown your stack and ruined some relationships to say, maybe I should do some shadow work. You can do it on the fly. So those are just a few things that have been helpful to me and helpful to my patients that I've either developed or collected along the way. I think we've given everybody quite a number of tools today, Kaedrich. What a great conversation. Before we say goodbye, is there anything else you'd like to share? Websites, anything you got going on, anything you want to direct people to?
Yeah, absolutely. My website, kaedrich.com. I've got a couple different shadow programs and some one-on-one type work. And what I recommend people to do is to reach out. I'm on Facebook, Instagram. My email is kaedrich.olsen@kaedrich.com, but reach out. Let's talk about some of the stuff you're looking at, some of the challenges, because nobody can just get into one of my shadow programs. We got to have a one-on-one consult first. We got to talk about it to see what the right path is for you. So let's reach out. Let's talk. Again, visit kaedrich.com. You'll find a way for us to connect there. kaedrich.com. And let's have a talk. It's a free consult that we can talk and find the right path to do some of the shadow work and spiritual development and paranormal training together.
Well, great, Kaedrich. What a fantastic. I always love hanging out with you, man. I have to do podcasts with you just to get to visit with you. But as we were talking about on a break, we're going to try to find a time to hang out together and celebrate life.
Absolutely.
And so thanks for all your love and all your wisdom. I've seen you've had a couple more appearances on Gaia. I was really excited. It seems like Gaia's really got a love of Kaedrich Olsen, which is cool, man.
Absolutely. Gaia's great. There are a lot of great people there, a lot of great content. And yeah, I've got a few more things that have gone up, talking about my trip to Norway and paranormal beings that I encountered in Norway, things that we can do to work with shadow work and paranormal stuff. It's a lot of fun stuff.
Yeah, so look, Kaedrich, up on Gaia TV, there must be at least 4 or 5 interviews with you in different shows now.
Oh yeah, I think we're quite a bit more than that.
Yeah, probably. I know I've probably watched at least 4 or 5 myself, and I'll say thank you to all of you guys. Hey, we're in this together, man. Nothing we're talking about is something that isn't something that haven't had to work through, and so don't feel like you're the only one or that you're something wrong with you, man. You're totally human. That's the problem. The angels have a lot of empathy for human beings because we're right in the middle of these two forces, and we have to deal with a lot of polarity to be human. And so give yourself a pat on the back, give yourself some empathy and some compassion. One thing I forgot to say is the practice of making love. One of the things that I do quite regularly is as a meditation is I just open my heart, and with every in-breath, I imagine I'm breathing the love of God, God's unconditional love into my being. with every out breath, I hold the intention I'm sharing love with all living beings and sending them love without any strings attached. And so what happens is you get quite high because you are constantly creating love inside of yourself. And the practice of making love each day fills you with love. And I found that in many cases, when people practice making love and giving it away with no strings attached, it changes their vibrational rate so high that a lot of the negative thoughts and feelings I used to have to deal with just don't come around anymore. And when they do, I just say, well, use that as your reminder to make some love, because you can do it while you're driving your car. You can do it anytime you want to. And it's free and it's easy. So there's my last shadow work tip for you. And I'll close by saying thank you to my sponsors for your amazing products. Nothing I share on the podcast from the sponsors isn't something that I don't use myself probably daily, and my family uses, my kids. And I have extremely strict values for what I share on the podcast. So thanks for anything you buy from the sponsors of the podcast. I know you're getting top quality nutrition, supplementation, and things to support you. And they do very beautiful things with the money you spend on them, such as supporting regenerative farmers and restoration of the earth. So thanks for helping me keep the podcast going. And thanks for helping me to help you by bringing you great guests and great products from the sponsors. And I love all of you. We're in this together. And I will see you guys next Tuesday with another amazing episode on what I don't know. I'll let it be a surprise. Lots of love. Thanks, Kaedrich. Lots of love, buddy.
Thank you. This is awesome. I appreciate it very much.
Me too. Can't wait for the next time.
Me too.
Aho.
Aho.
Thank you for listening to Living 4D with Paul Chek and today's guest, Kaedrich Olsen. You can follow Kaedrich on Instagram at Kaedrich_Olsen or on Facebook and YouTube at Kaedrich. And you spell his name Kaedrich. Kaedrich, together with Paul, created the 9.5-hour downloadable audio program, Are You Possessed?, which is available at shop.chekinstitute.com. You can catch up with Paul on Instagram, TikTok, and Threads at paul.chek, on X at Paul Chek, or on his YouTube podcast channel, youtube.com/living4D with Paul Chek. You can watch more on Paul's blog at paulcheksblog.com or visit the Chek Institute site at chekinstitute.com to find Paul's e-learning courses, his advanced training programs, and to learn more about the Chek Academy. You can read the show notes and find links to all the resources mentioned in this episode at chekinstitute.com/podcast. Again, a big thank you to our premier sponsors, Bioptimizers, Paleo Valley, Wild Pastures, and Organifi. We could not produce this podcast without their support. As you heard in the podcast, all our sponsors offer special discounts for our listeners, so please visit the show notes page for links and details. And if you enjoyed today's episode, please consider leaving us a 5-star rating and a warm review on the podcast platform of your choice. This podcast is available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, Audible, and YouTube.